This is What If Deku Was an Earthbender, Book 1. Let's dive right into it. I've been gone for an entire month, and I told you guys I wouldn't be that. I told you guys I'm gonna try to lock back into my normal, regular scheduled upload schedule. Because before then, my upload schedule was kind of random, but it was at least like a couple times a week. But that's when my videos and my editing was kind of like bare minimum. I did the bare minimum, and I didn't really do all the stuff I do now, like voice effects or sound effects, some visual, imaging like pictures and things like that, giving you extreme in-depth details of where the characters are at, the environment, things like that, and putting in a lot more effort into character building and individual characters as well. So that's what I want to do for my what ifs, and I really want to put more detail and more effort into each what if I do. But let's just dive right into this fanfiction. Enough of me yapping. I'm coming back stronger and better than ever. Graduation is right across the corner. I already graduated in like 3 days. So let's dive right into this, guys. Start our story off with a young boy waking up in the middle of the night, hearing his parents scream and more or less have an argument, going back and forth, hearing vague words like war, people coming, and benders. Him being confused with what he's hearing, but chalking it up to some sort of adult problems. He's about to go back to sleep when he hears a bang at the front door. Peeping out of his room, seeing his father get up from his mother as they're were sitting down arguing under their voices, trying not to wake up Izuku at the time. As his father walks to the front door, as he opens it, as he says, it can't be you. Why are you here? As out of nowhere, Izuku would have saw a bolt of lightning shoot through the living room. Saw flames starting to erupt the entire house. As his mother would have walked towards him, running through the smoke and running through the flames, grabbing him and telling him they need to go now. But as she's holding him, when his head is turned away, she yells out in fear as a huge boulder of rock gets sent flying through the house. She stops it with her bare hands. Izuku sees this, being surprised by this, assuming that his mother had only a low-scale earth manipulation quirk, as she tells Izuku to stay safe and that she'll always be with him. As she bends rock around his body, pushing him outside the building as a huge explosion erupts the entire house. As the rock construct breaks on impact, him going into, asleep, as he fades to black, hearing screams in the distance and flames burning his house down. We get a time skip a few years later, as a lot has changed, and that young boy is now grown up to be a teenage Izuku Midoriya. Now, through this time skip, a lot has happened, and a lot as in the story has changed drastically. With the death of Asashi and Inko, Izuku's life was thrown into a fireball of emotions. Izuku would have been, about to go into the system, but one of his relatives would have actually taken him in and would have adopted him, or more or less became his legal guardian, his uncle Bolin on his father's side. Bolin would have been a fire quirk user and also would have been a pretty good real estate agent, and also would have made a pretty good amount of money in his old Hollywood days. And Izuku, and teaching him and pretty much raising him as a son. Izuku, by the time his family died, he would have been around 5 years old, about a few months after he would have been diagnosed quirkless. Izuku's whole life would have been thrown under the gutter. When Izuku turned 10 years old, he started to develop abilities and powers he couldn't yet explain. He was told that he was quirkless all his life, but somehow, some way, when he was only about 10 years old, that fateful day where Bakugo, was basically going to bully him, that one day, Izuku would have bended a block of rock right in front of Bakugo, stopping him in his tracks. Being confused with what happened, Izuku would assume that he basically gained a quirk, and maybe he was a late bloomer or some sort of genetic anomaly, and he probably obtained the same quirk his mother had. But little does he know, Izuku's whole quirk idea, or his whole explanation of his powers, is a little bit off, but we'll get to that later. Next 5 years after his 10th day, or his 10th birthday, after he activated his power, he would have started to train furiously with it, realizing that his movements and using martial arts with his bending or with his quirk would help him use it more efficiently and also pack a bigger punch when he did use his powers. So he started training profusely and even helping and being helped out by his uncle. His uncle putting him in some martial arts classes, and at the end of the story, or by this canon story, Izuku would have been able to do about a good amount of martial arts. Ninjutsu, Muay Thai, boxing, kickboxing, and also being able to do a little bit of Kung Fu. By the time Izuku was 15, he knew only half of these martial arts, being a master or more or less very profoundly good at Muay Thai. So boxing. He was a really freaking good boxer. I'm going to put it right here, right now. Izuku at this point in the story, about 15 years old, canon, present time, we're narrating this story, he's really freaking good at kickboxing and boxing. To have a more grounded fighting style, considering that his power is literally being able to control rock. And that's really only the most he knows at this point. By the time Izuku was around 14, he would have learned how to sand bend, realizing that he can manipulate sand and shift it in ways that he could never even imagine. Izuku would have started to train, and train. Most of his days being spent learning how to physically fit his body to his quirk, and also learning how to use his body in more efficient ways, and also being able to fight on his own, even without using his quirk if he was to pit or be pit up against somebody in close quarters. Him being able to use very much hand-to-hand combat, close combat, fighting styles with his quirk, and also long-range fighting styles with his quirk. Him being very limited to only being able to sandbend and earthbend. Switched some time after that. We switched to present time the same day the sludge villain would have attacked. This story would be changed a little bit with Izuku not going to school that day. He'd rather spend his time training for the upcoming entrance exams, as he would have been training and doing some Kung Fu and also some boxing and shadow boxing at Deku Beach. Training at Deku Beach, as he would have heard some screaming in the distance, as he would have gotten on side and out of the beach area, going up the stairs. God dang, I can't talk for crack! Me guys, I didn't take my meds today, man. I'm sorry. Rush up the stairs, seeing a commotion happen right in town square. Him running up there and seeing a bunch of pro heroes circling around some sort of sludge infested villain trying to suffocate a young boy with the same school uniform Izuku had. Izuku looking closer and realizing it was Bakugo. Him looking around, seeing most of the heroes were keeping their distance, not really knowing how to get there without the sludge villain instantly just killing the boy right then and there. Izuku wouldn't think he would act. Even if his relationship with Bakugo was a little bit weirded out or a little bit different, I mean, hey, it is what it is. Izuku would have lunged straight towards Bakugo, pitting up a huge pillar of rock right in between him and the sludge villain, just thin enough to throw the sludge villain off. Him being confused on where the hell that even came from, Izuku would use sand bending to make the sand or make the dirt on Izuku's feet pretty much throw himself forward straight towards Bakugo, grabbing Bakugo and making a dome around them using earthbending, instantly locking them off and basically stopping the sludge villain in his tracks. The sludge villain with no real hostage anymore, the villain would immediately try to flee, but multiple of the pro heroes would have got on his cheeks and would not let him dip. They were on that booty like white on rice. Everyone would have been obtained and detained, as Izuku would have asked Bakugo if he's okay, but Bakugo smacking his hand away saying, "I'm fine," as some underlying tension would have been between them. Something else would have happened between them besides just Bakugo bullying him until he was 10 years old, assuming he was quirkless. It would be something deeper than that, something more rooted in jealousy. But before anything else could pop off, before they started getting into an argument or even started trying to figure out why they hate each other, we get interrupted when All Might breaks the dome, asking the kids if they're okay. Izuku saying yeah, as Bakugo said, "Yeah, you're All Might. I thought you'd be bigger in person," as he would have just smiled saying, "You're funny, young Bakugo. My name's Bakugo." As Izuku would have said, "I'm a huge fan. Oh my gosh. Can you sign my forehead?" Say all that, but you get what I'm saying. Izuku was still a big fan of All Might, despite his whole childhood being thrown into the gutter when he was 5 years old. But Izuku would still be a huge fan of All Might, wanting to live up to his legacy, wanting to be a great hero that people would be able to look up to and see hope in, no matter where and who he is. Him being able to instill hope in anybody, the amount of hope he had in himself when he was a child. Wanting to give hope to people in their darkest times. Because we're going to get a little deeper into how Izuku felt doing his whole losing his entire family in a freak accident. But yeah, what happened? The pro heroes would have still chewed out Izuku's booty cheeks, asking him why in the heck did he jump in when pro heroes themselves were not gonna jump in. They didn't want to risk that kid's life. But Izuku said that you were doing nothing and he had to do something. His body just moved. As they would have just saw and scoffed, saying, okay, kid, we'll give you a pass this time because no one got hurt. But if you do that shit again, you're done. I'm telling you, we're pressing charges, boy. You're going down. Besides that, we see that they could just walk off, as All Might would have saw some potential in the boy. But he would have just scoffed, saying that I found someone else, though. As we'll learn a little bit more about that. But we get switched a few months later. Izuku would have gone deeper into his training at Deku Beach and would have been focusing on his, fighting tactics, being able to get more creative with bending, but still resonate and still trying to feel how he can bend better. But his quirk would be limited because he obviously didn't know how to actually use earthbending, not in the traditional sense. And we'll get deeper into the lore of why and how bending exists in this universe later in the video. We'll try to learn how to put a little bit more oomph to his punches and also bending, but realizing that it's just something missing, something that he's not doing right. Maybe he's not moving his body right. Maybe he's not feeling what he needs to feel. He feels he can do more, but he just can't get there. Him getting interrupted when a boy in a white jumpsuit with blonde hair asks him if he's okay, as Izuku says yeah. As he asks him why is he here, as he says, I'm here to train with my mentor. Why are you here? I'm here to train by myself. As they would have laughed at each other, as they would have introduced themselves. Izuku saying, I'm Izuku Midoriya. Who are you? Well, I'm a million. What? Is that actually your name? No. It's my hero name. I'm testing it out. But my name's Mirio. Nice to meet you. As they would have shaked hands, as they get interrupted by a skinny, frail, blonde-haired boy. Or blonde-haired man, actually. As Izuku looks over and says, Is that your dad? As he would chuckle, saying, no, he's my mentor. But yeah, we're gonna train on the other side though, so you have fun. As he would have walked past Izuku, as Izuku recognizing and trying to pick up on where he recognized that boy from. The other man looks at him like he recognizes him, as Izuku just does an awkward wave towards him waving back, saying, be safe out here. As he would have followed quickly after his student, I guess, by Izuku's pretty much point of view. Izuku would just be kind of thrown off by this interaction, but being kind of interested in what the heck they're going on or what the heck they're doing, but not really willing to be nosy or a nuisance. He would continue with his training, trying to get better with his fighting tactics, his hand-to-hand combat, and other things of that nature. Him going to multiple of the dojos that he's a part of, training against other people, and just trying to build up more combat experience and just getting better with his physical body, warming himself up for the entrance exams. The day would eventually come as Izuku would have been dropped off by his uncle. His uncle wishing him, do your best. Hey, rock him, That's not a cool pun. I know it's not a cool pun, but hey, you my nephew. Go get him, nephew. Yeah. I'm blocking your number tonight, man. Izuku would have just walked off as his uncle would have laughed. Him driving off and going back home. Izuku would have gotten to the front gates of UA, smiling, thinking to himself that he's here. His mom would be proud of him. He's gotten this far. People thought he was quirkless, and now he's here. Izuku would have walked right into UA, as he would have started to walk, as he looks at his phone, hearing a notification. Not really getting a lot of notifications, thinking it's his uncle that maybe forgot something or I don't know, maybe he forgot his keys because Suzuku has a spare key on him, and his uncle always seems to lose his keys, even though it's his house. But hey, who am I to judge? I don't even have a house key to my house. And shit, I better hope my parents are home. Fuck, I better hope. Besides that, Izuku looks down as he bumps into a vine-haired girl. Her getting herself up as Izuku would have instantly started to apologize, asking, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Izuku becoming kind of speechless. Seeing the girl's face as she would have gotten up saying, "It's fine. It's alright. Are you okay?" As him saying, yeah, I'm fine, but who are you?" I'm Ibra. I'm Ibra. Sorry, I'm Ibra. Izuku Midoriya. Sorry, I'm thrown off too. Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you. You here for the entrance exams? Yeah, aren't you? Yeah. As Izuku would have said, go get him. As she would have just nodded in. Okay, all right. See you later. As he would have walked off, as Izuku would be kind of flustered, being kind of confused on why he got so, clammy right there, like his heart was racing. But Izuku would have just tried to calm down and get back into the game, get back into his head, or get out of his head more or less, get his head back in the game basically. Izuku would have walked off, going right back into his game mode. He would have flew through the written exams, considering that he's still Izuku Midoriya, and he's still a pretty smart and talented kid. Nothing really changing besides him being an Earthbender and also him losing his family. But hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Cookie crumbles, metaphorically, of course. But yes, Izuku would be a little bit different personality-wise. I think you guys picked this up already. Izuku's not afraid to talk to girls or talk to people, but he is still kind of a quirky type of person. But he's more like a laid-back, chill, grounded type of personality, similar to like an Ultimate Spider-Man or an Iceman. More accurately, he's more of a Bolin type of personality from Legend of Korra. He's more of a Bolin mixed with Izuku Midoriya personality. Kind of like a mixture of those two characters, with Bolin's more quirky personality plus his more outgoing, jokesy type of persona, After that whole shebang dang, Izuku would eventually gotten into the practical exams, as this is where the real juicy part happens. Izuku would get ready and would have gotten ready to fire up the engine, as President Mike would have instantly told everybody to go. There are no real countdowns in the real world. Go! As Izuku would have heard this, instantly bending concrete underneath his feet and propelling himself forward over the doors. He would have landed doing a somersault, or more or less a barrel roll into a clean jab into a robot or a one-pointer, using rock and pretty much making rock covered gauntlets on his fist, punching them through these robots, making pretty good dents. But Deku, sorry, I do way too many ReZero what ifs. You would have hit him with a haymaker of doom, cracking one of the robot's shells wide open. Izuku isn't superhuman, physically at least, so he has to put a little bit of bending behind his punches, giving a little bit of oomph to it. But he is pretty much near peak human fighting style, pretty much being as physically capable as characters like Iron Fist or Bruce Lee, or maybe even characters similar to, what's a peak human physical person in fiction? I think either, I'm not gonna say Batman, because Batman's freaking crazy, dude. I don't know what the monks taught him, bro, I don't know what the monks taught him. But yeah, something similar to like Green Arrow's level of physicality. Izuku would have absolutely dominated this portion of the exams, basically just using bending to push these zero-pointers into walls, crush them, and even throw shards of concrete straight towards them, impaling them and making them into Swiss cheese. Eventually getting to the zero-pointer, about to run off, as he hears a girl scream. Looking past him, or looking behind himself, seeing a girl under some rubble. Azuku lunges right over there as he would have started to bend the rock off of her, helping her out of there pretty quickly. Telling her to go, as Azuku would have tripped on himself, or literally would have tripped on a piece of rebar, falling down to the ground, about to have the 0-pointer jump, or very much crush him like a freaking egg. Or not really egg, I don't know why I use that terminology, like soda can. But yeah, Azuku was about to get crushed, and not in the good way. Would have spiked, and out of nowhere he would have started to make a huge, about probably 30-40 foot long spike that would have impaled right through the 0-pointer's foot. As everybody in the office and the spectators would have been surprised at this. This is a crazy display of Earth manipulating quirk power. Azuku running off and trying to get out of the pretty much aftermath on the 0-pointer falling over. As a huge spike would have been impaling out of the ground, everybody from afar seeing this. Azuku would have lunged right into the alleyway trying to get out of the debris and the pretty much rock that was falling, as Azuku would eventually run out of the area, saving himself last minute. Azuku being surprised on what he just did. He was never supposed to be able to do that amount of bending in such a short amount of time. It was literally a second, as he literally made that entire spike out of nowhere. It was something he didn't even know he could do. But shortly after that, the siren would go off as everyone was told to go home and wait for the results of the, well, entry exams. Azuku would get home, and a few days would pass as he would have eventually gotten a letter in the mail telling him and announcing him and giving him the good news that he's got into UA. Azuku would have started to cry, being so excited that he got in. He made it, but he's not done yet. His goal is to become the #1 hero, or simply a hero that everybody can look up to, a beacon of hope, power, and being able to change the world and give hope to people that had none of it, just like him when he was a child. To be able to pull somebody out of the darkness and save them from themselves. As Azuku would have gotten ready, as he would have made his way to UA, opening and making his way into class 1A. Being thrown off when he saw a dude just straight up sleeping in a freaking sleeping bag, and a few other people seeing them as well. Azuku getting there pretty early, actually. Azuku would sit down as a few of the students would walk in. Characters like Ida, Asashi, Ida, Mina, Kirishima, Denki Kaminari, and also a familiar face he saw at the entry exams, Ibra, as she would be replacing Mineta in the storyline in Class 1A. Because honestly, in my personal opinion, I don't know how the hell Mineta got in Class 1A, or the Telquark guy, over someone that can turn their body into freaking steel, and another dude that can literally elongate her hands to gargantuan levels and pretty much make and do literal airbending. Like, bro, what do you mean a guy with sticky balls for a quirk got higher than a literal girl that had goat powers, bro? What are you talking about right now, man? Like, anybody else should have got in the Class 1A besides Mineta. It makes zero sense. How in the hell did this bald... I hate him so much because it makes no sense that he's in Class 1A. He might be really smart because I guess that's the explanation they're giving us, because he's really good at his test scores and he's actually incredibly smart. But I don't care. In this continuity, we're just gonna say Ibra is actually smart, and I'm gonna give her a little bit more depth. I know she's a very like religion-based coded character, which I like, but I'm gonna give her a little bit more depth since we didn't see much of her at all throughout the anime, or not enough for me to really gauge exactly who she is as a complex and individual character. But we're gonna get deeper into her backstory and her character and everything along those lines. But yes, to end up striking up a conversation with her and talks with her, you know, asking her about, you know, why you got into UA, you know, how's your quirk work, and things like that nature. As they would have gotten deeper into conversation, about to ask about, you know, the quirk and go deeper into that, then being thrown off and being interrupted when Azal gets up from his sleep, telling them that it took you exactly 10 minutes to quiet down. Yeah, we're going to change that real fast. Now get dressed and go back to the locker rooms, because we're going to do some quirk assessments. him being confused, as Uraka would have gotten up saying, "What do you mean quirk assessments?" As he would have said, "Quirk assessments. You might have passed the quirk rated exams, or the practical exam, or the entrance exam, but you didn't pass my standards. And if you want to be pro heroes, you're gonna have to be the best of the best. You're in class 1A because the school thought you were the best of the best. Well, I need to see it myself." Alright? As everybody would have just went with it, Izuku just being, well, kind of pumped to use his quirk in front of his classmates to actually show off what he can do. As Izuku would be a little cocky in its continuity, but still being humble enough considering that he was thought to be quirkless for 5 years, in a world where quirks are pretty much everything. So Izuku would get ready and dressed, as Kirishima would have noticed the scars on his arm and on his body. Izuku would have been training his body pretty hard over the last 5 years. Izuku would have just told Kirishima that, just some sparring training with my dojo masters across, Japan. As he would have said, "Dojo masters? How many martial arts do you know, dude?" A lot. As he would have said, "That's so manly, dude." Yeah, bro, chill out. So you sound a little zesty festy. I ain't gonna hold you, twin. And I love Kirishima, one of my favorite My Hero characters. I might even like him more than Deku. I'm not gonna lie. Kirishima is a goated character. I mean, absolutely peak. And I'm about to make a custom of him, or a custom of My Hero characters, with my new custom, figure lineup. If you want to see a full review on that video, I'm making a review on that guy right after this video is uploaded and edited. But yeah, class would have been told to get ready and get set and pretty much, well, do their quirk assessments. As I would have told them all to throw a ball, as the ball throwing would have gone somewhere the same. But when Izuku's turn came along, and when Ibra's turn came along, she would have used her vines to pretty much wind up the ball, making it slingshot up into the sky, getting a pretty good score. Now with Izuku, he would have done a little something different, as he would have started to case the ball in a thin layer of sand that was on the ground where they were throwing. As he would have started to bend the ball and would have rocket launched it, doing a gesture like kind of a 1-inch punch, making it fly through the sky, getting a pretty good score, about a higher score than he got in original canon. For a long jump, Izuku would use a little bit of bending to propel himself forward, getting a pretty good score, as he would have used some sand bending to pretty much make an impact type of burst over his feet, giving him a little bit of a boost, but most of it actually just being his bare leg strength, getting a pretty good score overall, considering that Izuku's pretty physically fit, on top of being able to fight pretty well. Izuku having a pretty more streamlined physical aesthetic, similar to his physicality or his physical body from his 10th art training with All Might, but a lot more perfected and built for like sprinting and swimming, and also especially fighting. Built for more athletic and a lot of flexibility in general, but his forearms and legs and pretty much core muscles being exceptionally strong. Deku for the race would have gotten a pretty good score, nothing superhuman, but a pretty good score. Grip test strength, pretty good score as well, and overall pretty average physical stats in general. His power being complex, but not really being able to really do the best in these type of specific categories or tests. But yeah, with that being said, that's what happens, and that's that. Izuku would have gotten around 3rd to 4th place, and Ibra would have gotten around 6th to 7th place, and a few others would have gotten lower and lower, and blah blah blah. Aizawa would have still made that whole thing about, oh, if you don't pass, if you don't get above 0th place or last place, you're getting freaking expelled. But he was just capping to see if people were really going to use everything they had to stay in, as he wanted to see where everybody else was at, as he saw potential in Izuku, but a lot of potential in every one of the students. Izuku would have walked off, as he would have gotten ready to go home. But as he's going home, well, let's just say he would have actually bumped into another familiar face, or a familiar face in general. He would have bumped into Ibra yet again. They would have been catching the bus, as Izuku's uncle would have gotten caught up in work, as he would have eventually made it home, getting off the bus and actually picking up Ibra's number, as he wanted to learn a lot more about her and actually being kind of happy by this. As he would have gone to sleep that night, as we get switched the next couple days. The next couple days are pretty chill, but he does get pretty much thrown into a loophole or kind of a cluster fricker. Deku was just chilling in his room as the day is going pretty slow. I mean, as always, and here today, and they're really just doing normal written exams and things of that nature, and quizzes and things like that. Normal school stuff. But they get interrupted when they hear thumping in the hallway. One of them, or especially Kirishima, asking what's that noise, as out of nowhere a huge would have hit the door, having All Might burst out of the doors and tell the students that I am here, as he would have been wearing his Golden Age suit. As Deku would have instantly catched up on this, saying, "Oh my gosh, it's All Might!" All Might would have told the class that they're going to be doing combat training today, and he's going to be overseeing it, as I wasn't here today, but he'll be able to take and pick up the slack. So I hope you guys are all ready to get your hero on. As he would have opened up his jacket, or not his jacket, but pretty much would have pulled out a remote from his cape, telling the students that your hero costumes are here. The soups make the pros make the soups. I don't know which way it goes. As he would have clicked the button, as everybody's suits and hero costumes would have been popped out of the walls with their, suitcase around their suits. Or, I don't know how to describe it. Their suitcase with their suits in it. Jesus, I can't talk for crap. He would have grabbed his hero costume and would have been excited. Opening the suitcase or the briefcase, seeing his hero costume, as it would have been based off of his late mother's old wrestling suit. When he was younger, his mother told him stories about how she was a boxer, or more or less a wrestler, back in her heyday. As Izuku would have been kind of, happy that they got it almost completely right. They took away the sleeves because that was a idea and actually an element he wanted to take away from the original suit. Right here of Izuku's, mother's wrestling suit, but it's mainly specifically based off of Toph's outfit from, or Avatar: The Last Airbender. Wearing almost the exact same outfit, it just having a little bit more durable fabric and clothing to it, but looking almost the same, just fitted for Izuku's body. Izuku would get ready and would have felt amazing in this suit, as he would be kind of surprised and kind of, thrown off about the whole barefoot thing. But seeing it actually made his bending better, considering that it was the only way he actually found out how he can sand bend, by doing some training barefoot. And also with his whole martial arts background, fighting barefoot just feels more natural to him personally. Eventually the combat assessments or the combat training begins, as they're told about the rules and what's going to happen pretty much. Every student will be picked and pit against a team and be pit with a teammate. 2-on-2, villains versus heroes. Izuku still gets teamed up with Uraka as they get going, as Ibra takes the spot of Mineta. Ibra's match pretty much goes the same. If Mineta didn't win the original match, they win now with Ibra's quirk and her more tactical thinking with the help of Momo. Gets ready and tries to figure out a good plan to take on Ida and Bakugo, as Uraka and him are going up the stairs, as they try to talk to each other about a good diversion plan or something to go about. Izuku tells Uraka that he's going to distract Bakugo. He can give her some time to get up there to the bomb room, as Ida will be the only person she'll have to handle with. If he's able to get and take down Bakugo and join her up there, they can easily take down Ida with pretty much just outsmarting him, or maybe even just him making a rock formation in front of Ida mid-run, making him pretty much rush into a pillar. As she would have said, that's an awesome plan, as they would have split up, as she would have went upstairs, Izuku staying on one step, and pretty much making as much noise as possible to try to get the attention of Bakugo. Knowing Bakugo was a pretty hard-headed asshat, and would obviously go straight for him. Also, guys, I'm going to cut down on the cussing. Sorry for, cussing earlier, but yeah, we'll cut down on it a little bit. Bakugo walk through the smoke after making a few explosions, pretty much just ore farming, as he would have walked over, seeing Izuku down the hallway. Them staring down at each other, as Bakugo would have instantly lunged towards Izuku lunging right towards him, as he would start to make quick and jab remarks, dodging out of Bakugo's attacks and explosions like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. I mean, just straight up dodging, weaving, blocking, and taunting Izuku or taunting Bakugo by flicking him upside the forehead after dodging his attacks, or even just smacking him in the back of the head and making him stumble on himself. Literally just taunting the crap out of him. Bakugo get pissed off, throwing a huge explosion at Izuku dodging it, but also being thrown off his rocker onto his back. Bakugo going for a quick jab right at Izuku would have dodged out of it, but not fast enough, as the explosion would have recoiled off of him, throwing Izuku against the wall almost out of a window. Izuku catching himself mid-fall, as Izuku would have lunged himself back into the fight or in the hallway, getting hit with a crazy haymaker, sending him flying to the ground. Izuku would have hit the ground hard, Izuku looking back up, seeing Bakugo about to smash his brains in with a crazy stomp with them big ass boots. But Izuku would have dodged instantly, cracking Izuku oh my god! Bakugo. Pause, wait a minute, hold up. Cracking Bakugo on his kneecaps, hitting him on the ground. Izuku would have grabbed Bakugo by the collar, chucking him against the wall that he made mid-fight, using his bending. Izuku would have looked at this as he would have started to smile, saying, "That's all you got, Bakugo?" When we were kids, he fought with a little bit more, oomph. But I guess since we're, evenly matched, or I guess outly matched, I'm obviously better than you, so I mean, hey. As Bakugo would have gotten pissed off, saying, "You're not better than me, you damn nerd," as he threw a huge explosion at Izuku. Izuku would have bended a huge wall of concrete between them, as Bakugo would have gotten pissed off, pulling his trigger mid-fight, as Bakugo was still next to the wall, shooting a huge explosion, pushing the entire hallway, making it unstable. Izuku and Bakugo would have fell down to a lower ground, as Izuku would have fell almost on some rebar, almost impaling himself. Izuku came back up and looking around the smoke and the dust and letting it clear. Out of nowhere, his explosion would have lunged right in the back of Izuku's body, sending him flying to a nearby pillar. Izuku would have tasted pure raw dirt as he would have hit that pillar hard as hell. Izuku would have gotten back up, seeing Bakugo throw another explosion towards him. Izuku would have dodged, instantly hitting Izuku. Oh my god, bro. Bakugo with a crazy haymaker kick straight to the noggin, sending him down to the ground. Bakugo would have gotten back up, being kind of groggy and dazed, as Deku would have pretty much given him a crazy, and I mean crazy, haymaker of doom straight to the nose, sending Bakugo straight to the ground. Bakugo would have gone through another explosion towards Izuku, but dodging it, but him also hitting Izuku with a crazy elbow straight to the face. Izuku would have fell down to the ground, but Bakugo would have gone for another punch, but Izuku would have just locked in, going into his beast mode, and literally just pulling out his inner Bruce Lee, dodging multiple of the attacks, and blocking one of them, and just going back and forth, bop, 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 just blocking him, dodging him, just straight up dog-walking Bakugo in physical combat at least. Bakugo threw another explosion towards Izuku, but would have grabbed his arm and would have absolutely right in the elbow of Bakugo's arm, cracking that shit. Bakugo was down to the ground, yelling out in pain, as he would have threw a huge explosion towards Izuku, but grabbing his gauntlet off of his wrist, kicking Bakugo down, and pulling the pin right underneath them. As the entire floor would have caved in on itself, Izuku covering himself in concrete and making the fall a little bit less, hurtful or damaging to himself, but also making a comfortable padding of sand underneath them as they landed, bending the rock on the landing area they were about to land on into sand. As Izuku actually was surprised that it actually worked. He was testing out being able to turn solid concrete into sand using his sand bending, but he never thought he could actually do it in such a fast amount of time. But he was surprised at this, as he was actually kind of happy. But that happiness would be thrown out the window after Bakugo would have absolutely tackled him down to the ground, him bleeding from his head profusely and his arm being broken, but Deku looking at him saying checkmate, as he would have hit Bakugo with a crazy headbutt, knocking him out cold. Izuku gets back up, limping, having a few broken ribs from the fall, as Izuku would have started to bend himself a concrete pillow underneath his body, pulling himself up the multitude of buildings, or not buildings, but floors they fell through. Izuku would eventually make it up there to the training area, not training area, but the bomb room, seeing a bunch of floating rocks in the midst of everything. Izuku using his earthbending to shoot multiple of the rocks straight towards Ida, throwing Ida off of his rocker. Ida about to fall off and basically drop the bomb. Izuku bends the sand or bends the earth underneath the bomb, turning it into sand, making it a soft landing for it. Izuku lunges straight towards Ida, making a pit right underneath Ida, making him fall down to the second floor, knocking him out from the amount of force that he got hit by trying to run that fast and then getting the entire floor underneath him caved in. Izuku retrieves the W after both of their villains are knocked out cold, as Izuku was kind of crowned the MVP of the combat training. And they do go to Recovery Girl. Izuku getting some kisses for his broken ribs, and Bakugo getting some kisses for his broken arm, or more or less sprained arm, since his elbow was literally caved in on itself. But I don't know. Hey, it is what it is. Bakugo getting getting patched up, and Izuku getting patched up as well. Izuku would have caught Bakugo in the hallway, so they would have looked at each other, as Bakugo would have said that you're still the same kid all those years ago. Always fiending for attention. Always wanting to be better than everybody else. Better than everybody else. Look at you, Bakugo. Look at you, Kachan. You already think you're better than everybody else because everybody told you were. Right from the jump. But as soon as I got my quirk, as soon as I started acting different, I was the bad guy. Please. As he would have walked off as we get switched the next day. Would have passed by normally. Eventually, the students getting to school one day and being told about a trip, or more or less kind of a field trip, going to the USJ. Them putting on their hero costumes, and on the drive there, them getting into a conversation about quirks and how their quirks exactly work. Going back and forth, and Ibra explaining about how she can manipulate the hair on her head and pretty much grow it, lengthen it, and control other vine and plant life, or not plant life, but specifically vines, and bury them in the ground and use it as defense and other things like that. Izuku also explaining his quirk to the class, saying that he can manipulate and shape Earth and other things like that. As Deku would have said, so you can manipulate Earth? And that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, no, I know, it's awesome, right? Izuku and the rest of the class would have been thrown off guard, or more or less interrupted, when Aizawa tells them to get off the bus as they made it. As Izuku gets out the bus, looking at the USJ, being in awe. They eventually get inside as they're introduced to Mrs. 13, or the number 13 hero. 13th, or Mr. 13. I don't remember her name. I really don't. She's not really a memorable character for me personally, but hey. Deku does end up just sitting there chilling, and he's next to Ibra, just, sparking up a conversation. But as they're talking, they get interrupted when they hear a commotion, as a dot in the center of the USJ opens up into a giant portal, as a villain walks out, and after that, a multitude of other villains pop out as well. 13 tries to get him out of there as Aizawa buys him some time, but Aizawa gets kind of thrown off guard as we see 13 get bodied by a shadow quirk user, Kirigiri. Kirigiri takes swift and very quick work of 13 and scatters the rest of the students across the entire field or USJ. Izuku gets sent flying from the top of the dome as he tries to figure out where he can grab onto or where he is. As he's about to hit the water, out of nowhere, Froppy catches him, landing him on top of the boat. As him, Ibra, and Froppy are stranded on the boat, surrounded by villains or just straight up thugs. Trying to make a plan, not really knowing what to do, but him looking around, seeing that he can probably make a diversion. As they see multiple villains start to throw multiple water attacks and having water-based quirks, and some of them even trying to get on top of the boat, Izuku using his Earthbending to break off some of the rock, the core, and pretty much, I guess you could say, statues and stuff that are in the boat, using them as projectiles, keeping the villains off the boat. Buying some time, Izuku looks around, not really being around a lot of earth, considering most of the boat is made out of metal, plastic, and other materials similar to that. Izuku had to figure out a plan now more than ever. Him going back and forth with Froppy and Ibra, as they would have made a pretty decent plan. Izuku saying that he needs to do a little bit of a suicide mission, as they're confused as Izuku lunges off the boat, diving deep into the water. Ibra being thrown off guard and confused on why the hell he just jumped in the water, filled with a bunch of villains that are trying to kill us. Him swimming under the water as fast as possible and try to hit the ground of the water before Izuku passes out or runs out of water, or before a villain catches up to him. Izuku grabs the bottom of the water floor, grabbing some dirt and starting to bend or tornado of dirt and mud around him as the water starts to be pulled into a vortex of sorts. Izuku starts to push out multiple pro villains, or just villains, sorry, I don't know why I'm using the word pro so much, but villains out of the water area and push them out one by one, 1,000, 1,000, and 1,000 times faster than last time. A couple of them going sent flying, and some of them even crashing into the dome. Izuku eventually pushes himself out of the water, propelling himself forward using a pillar of concrete. As he propels himself forward, he grabs onto Ibra and Froppy as they eventually land very harshly on the shoreline. They get back up as they run across the bridge as they try to figure out where to go next, as they see a monstrous figure fighting Aizawa. Aizawa and the Nomu's fight goes similarly the same, as Aizawa gets his cheeks clapped by the Nomu, and the Nomu does end up fighting and going toe-to-toe with All Might when he eventually arrives. Izuku does keep his distance, but he still technically does get into a scrabble or fight against Shigaraki. Shigaraki tries to go for Froppy as Izuku puts up a pillar behind him and also in front of him, boxing off Shigaraki. Shigaraki quickly makes work with that steel, or not steel, but concrete box as he breaks it apart with his decay. Izuku sees this as Izuku tries to keep his distance, telling them to get out of here as Shigaraki lunges right towards him. He keeps his distance, putting up multiple pillars of concrete and rock in between them, trying to keep Shigaraki from a distance, realizing that Shigaraki's quirk has something to do with maybe breaking down material, or maybe even just decaying or destroying solid objects. Izuku trying to keep his distance, putting up multiple pillars, constructs, and domes around Shigaraki, but him just sprazing through these constructs like they're nothing. Eventually detains or pretty much grabs Shigaraki's wrists, making them and covering them in rock, but as he uses his power, he breaks through it, giving Izuku just enough wiggle room to hit him with a clean haymaker straight to the noggin. Izuku's left arm is touched by this, as only his clothing gets decayed off, top sleeve being pretty much ripped off, as Izuku instantly throws off his top as he sees it decay slowly. Izuku gets into a fighting stance, getting into a boxing position as he covers his fist in a very thick layer of concrete and stone. Him throwing multiple haymakers fist to fist and just trying to get a clean hit on Shigaraki. Shigaraki being kind of surprised by this, as every time he decays Izuku's fist, or more or less his gauntlets, he instantly bends more gauntlets over his body. Izuku dodging more and more attacks, eventually Shigaraki trying to grab him by his head, but Izuku, goddamn, an entire rock armor over his body, keeping Shigaraki at a distance as his armored rock construct immediately starts to decay, but giving Izuku just enough, durability not to decay himself. Izuku is eventually saved when Snipe shows up, sniping Shigaraki's kneecaps in as Kirigiri sees this. Kirigiri instantly tells the villains to dip out as he grabs Shigaraki and makes his grand escape. After All Might quickly makes work with the Nomu, still being kind of thrown off in the same fight happening between him and the Nomu, but Izuku would have been tuckered out and would have passed out, kind of pinning his whole speed thing into perspective, as he was literally on adrenaline rush trying not to get touched by Shigaraki. A few days later, we see Izuku pretty much just chill out on the days they have off after the USJ event happens. Wondering exactly what happened, at the beginning of the episode with the whole school getting thrown off guard and the press showing up. Nothing really changes besides Izuku just using his bending to make a construct of pillar or pretty much rock to make himself taller so he can get the attention of the rest of the classmates or his peers. But besides that, the next couple days pass pretty quickly. He spends most of his time training and getting better and trying to get his reaction time faster and his bending even quicker. He was fast enough to barely make constructs to keep himself safe from Shigaraki's quirk, but he had to get faster, he had to get better, he had to get stronger. But he just felt like something was missing. Something he was doing was wrong. And it's just getting more and more frustrating for him to figure out what it is. But with that being said, Izuku just continues with his training, eventually ending up running into Ibra on his free time. Him and Ibra do end up talking and even going on a little bit of a walk on the beach, training together, as their quirks are pretty complementary, as she does more of the whole plant side of earthbending or earth manipulation, as Izuku mainly relies on sand bending while they're on the beach training. Izuku does end up becoming better with being able to deconstruct and reconstruct solid matter into sand and rock, pretty quickly, but he's still maybe 2 or 3 seconds too slow, for his liking at least. But as they're talking and, just conversating, she does ask him about his family, as Izuku kind of gets, gets cold. He shuts down a little bit, asking her about her family, but her just chuckling, saying, "You're deflecting the question. What happened?" "Well, my mom and dad are dead, both of them, and they died in a freak accident, at least what the police said, a lightning strike or whatever, and the house got blown up. A few months after that, a few weeks actually, my uncle Boomy took me in, and ever since he's been raising me since. He's a pretty good uncle. Might even call him my dad sometimes. I mean, he's been there for me. He's been the number one person to believe in me for the longest time, even when I thought I was quirkless." "I thought you were quirkless?" "Well, when I was younger, my doctor said I was quirkless because I didn't have the whole joint thing, but I guess it was just a genetic anomaly, or maybe even a miracle or something. I don't know. But ever since, I've kind of just tried to keep myself humble. But I'm trying to keep myself good enough for my family to be proud of, I mean, only live once, and I'm just trying to make my parents proud as much as I can make them, at least." As she smiles, saying, That's very noble, Izuku." As they look at each other more deeply, about to kiss, but getting interrupted when his uncle picks him up. Him chuckling and saying, "Are you for real right now, kid? Man, get inside the car." As Izuku just says, "I'm sorry" about him, as he hugs her and tells her goodnight and hopes she gets home safe. Izuku gets into the car and pretty much scoffs, saying, "Are you for real right now, Uncle Boomy? Are you dead ass right now? Are you dead right now? You dead ass right now?" Uncle Bolin, sorry guys, this is a day away from recording, and I have not scripted none of this. Bolin ends up picking up Izuku. They go back home, as the next couple days follow accordingly. Izuku just going back to training and texting Ibra on the side. We get switched to when they get back to school, as normal school days proceed like usual. But they are told about the sports festival and how they're still going to be doing it besides or despite what happened in the USJ. So showing strength and perseverance, and that the villains aren't just going to back them down in a corner, and they're still going to do what they're meant to do. Show the world what UA is made of. Being able to show off what he has, and also being able to, pretty much show the world that he's good enough. As there's some underlining meaning behind Izuku's subconscious, as Izuku, most of his story is comprised of him trying to prove himself to somebody or someone. But that will quickly change as the story unravels or unfolds. Deku does end up getting to the sports festival event as the first, pretty much, competition begins, a race. Izuku instantly feels a weird sensation on his feet, as when the race starts, a huge wave of ice covers everyone's feet. Izuku realizes this pretty quickly, bending some rock underneath his feet, breaking the ice pretty quickly, going into a full-on sprint past everyone. Izuku starts to run as he gets right past the 0-pointer pretty quickly after it's frozen solid, propelling himself forward, making a pillar of stone, making himself fly faster, hitting the ground pretty hard, but using some sand bending to cushion his blow. Izuku starts to make multiple sand whips, hitting multiple of the 1-pointers and pretty much warding them off pretty quickly, getting them out of his way, trying to keep up with Todoroki. Todoroki and Bakugo are pretty much at the pretty much the top 3 runners right now, as Izuku eventually gets to the mine area after he easily swipes past the cannon area using Earthbending to pretty much just make an entire bridge, just running across that entire thing and collapsing the bridge every step he takes using Earthbending. Izuku eventually makes the bridge behind him collapse after he makes his way across the area as he eventually gets to the mine area, using sand bending to make another bridge, running across all the mines and getting right in first place. Bakugo and Todoroki aren't letting this slide as they quickly follow after Izuku, but Izuku running as they're all in a 3-on race, and them almost neck and neck with each other, but Izuku smiles saying checkmate as he makes a huge pillar of concrete in front of both of them, stopping them in their tracks, being thrown off guard, even falling over a little bit. Todoroki instantly pushes pretty much the concrete pillar out of the way using a huge shard of ice as he instantly tries to catch up with Deku, as Bakugo explodes himself, pretty much propelling himself like a torpedo right behind Deku. But Deku eventually makes it to first place, just like an original canon, landing down to the ground pretty harshly after Deku sees Bakugo and Todoroki quickly follow after him. Todoroki gains second place and Bakugo gains third place, being absolutely pissed. But we get switched to the, well, I guess we could say team mission or the team competition. Now, with this competition, I actually did not like this part of the sports festival because it was a little bit boring, if I'm being honest with you. But only thing that really happens is Izuku does still taunt and is able to push Todoroki to the brink of using his fire quirk, even a small amount of flames bursting out of Todoroki's hands, as Izuku notices this. So Todoroki and Izuku's relationship is kind of still similar, as if the same. He doesn't, suspect Izuku to be the love child of All Might or anything like that, as we're not learned about his whole, quirk marriage and things like that until later on in the series through Deku's perspective, as he's not pulled into that conversation with Todoroki. But Todoroki does still see him as a little bit of a threat, since he's pretty strategic at how he fights, but he also fights with a lot of brutality and a lot of firepower, but also works kind of strategically using his earthbending in more unique and kind of cool ways, using it in ways like tricking people, pretty much traps, and also hitting people with a barrage of punches made out of stone. Still tries to fight Izuku and go after him, but the same team does end up happening, but Uraka and everybody else, they do end up getting in the same team. Ibra does end up being on the team where Mineta would have been on original canon, actually getting a lot more points that time, using her vines to pretty much throw people off and grabbing them off of people's heads and other people's body parts, using it more like a sneaky way of stealing other headbands. Besides that, nothing really changes too much in this race or this portion of the sports festival. But we do get switched to the juicy bit that changes a pretty big amount: the combat training, or the one-on-ones. The one-on-ones begin as the first match happens. Izuku does end up going against Shinso, just like an original canon, as Izuku does end up being in the ring. Shinso does end up trying to taunt Izuku, just like an original canon, as Izuku just is about to hit him with a clean boulder straight to the noggin, but he gets thrown off guard when Shinso starts to bring up his mom and his dad. Izuku's pissed off as he loses concentration, as he drops the boulder mid-conversation, as Shinso smiles saying, "I got you, huh? I had a nerve, huh? Wait, so who's Inko Midoriya then, huh?" Izuku get pissed, as he would be confused on how the hell this kid knows who his parents are. Him saying that he did a little research on everybody in class 1A. You might think you're the best of the best, but you're surely not that good, considering that you couldn't even help your parents when they needed you the most. I mean, you might have been quirkless, but I think you could have at least helped them a little bit. I mean, you're the only survivor? That seems a little suspicious, huh? I mean, what would your parents think about you if you were so, I don't know, weak? I mean, do they even love you? As Izuku gets pissed off, saying, "Who the hell do you think you're talking?" As Izuku gets thrown off guard, being thrown into a trance. The whole ring is kind of shocked that Shinso even brought up his parents, as it was kind of public domain, considering that it was a case that was in the public records, but still, it was literally a accident. Izuku was literally 5 years old and his parents died, like both of them. He was parentless. He was an orphan in one night. His whole life got flipped upside down in a span of a few months. He was told he was quirkless, and then his parents died only 2 months later. I mean, who can even understand what he's going through, let alone some random hobo kid with grady ass eyeballs trying to throw him off his rocker. But Izuku was in a trance, about to get thrown off the ring, as Shinso tells him to walk off. As Izuku starts to walk off, but him feeling some sort of pressure on his body, some sort of feeling or force on his shoulder pulling him back. As Izuku's confused on what that feeling is, as he sees a faded image of a woman with a black bun with wide out eyes, as Izuku sees her as she looks at him. No words are exchanged, but he feels a feeling of determination, but also rage within his body. Rage he didn't even feel before, but it was always there. As Izuku gets snapped out of it, as Izuku looks towards Shinso, as a huge boulder of stone gets sent flying right towards him, about as big as a freaking truck. A huge chunk of the arena being thrown into mayhem. He using his bending to about to freaking one-shot this dude. Cement Head instantly pits a concrete pillar between the boulder and Shinso, as Shinso's slightly saved by this as he's knocked out cold and knocked out of the ring. Deku is kind of reprimanded by this because that shot or that attack could have killed Shinso, but Izuku doesn't care. Izuku scoffs at Aizawa, basically trying to reprimand him as Izuku walks off. Izuku getting pissed off and overall pretty much fuming. He's never got that mad before, and he never thought he would have it in his body to try to kill somebody like that. I mean, he pulled some crazy moves when he was fighting Bakugo in the combat training, but he never tried to really one-shot somebody like that. Not really. It scared him a little bit. As Izuku gets snapped out of it, as Aibra asks him if he's okay, as he says, yeah, I'm fine. Her asking him if he's alright. I mean, he said some pretty crazy things about your parents. Yeah, it's fine. I got over it. It was only like around 10 years ago. I'm good. Izuku trying to calm his mind down and trying to figure out exactly what happened back then. Well, who was that woman? How? What the hell is going on with me? Izuku gets switched away as we get switched to the next couple of matches that happen similar, the same. Now, Aibra does end up fighting a few other candidates and other people from her old class in the original timeline, as she ends up getting a pretty good overall, score and goes up the rankings pretty quickly. She does end up still losing against other members and other, pretty much classmates, as she doesn't get it pretty far in original canon. Around as far as she would have gotten in original. But we do get switched to the top finals, or the more juicy woosy fights, as we get switched to Uraka versus Bakugo. Uraka and Bakugo's match goes similar, exactly the same. Deku still tries to give her some pointers and some pep talk, but she ends up still pretty much getting her cheeks clapped by Bakugo, and she gets her booty cheeks ripped apart. I mean, she gets bodied. But, Bakugo's Bakugo, no matter what timeline. So, with that happening, most of the pro heroes are kind of, thrown off guard, thinking Bakugo's fighting tactics and him beating the absolute crap out of Uraka was kind of brutal and absolutely just toying with her with his mass amounts of explosion and just raw horsepower. But, it's a fight to fight. I mean, we can't be going soft on people, right? So, what happened is Izuku does end up getting kind of pissed off at this, but just throwing it behind his head, trying to lock in and focus on his own type of, fight. As the Todoroki and Deku fight eventually comes to a close, as Izuku is walking as he bumps into a flaming beard man, Endeavor. Endeavor does confront Izuku, asking him if you are the famous Izuku Midoriya. I've seen you in there with my son. I saw you push him to his brink during the 4-team last competition. I want you to push my son to his limits. Make him use his full potential. He's my son, and he needs to use his quirk to his fullest potential, or else he'll never get to where he needs to be. He never will get to the point of becoming the #1 hero. Izuku looks at him, asking him if he should care about this, as Izuku just walks past him, as Endeavor's kind of pissed off by this kid being so arrogant, as Deku doesn't really care too much about Endeavor, not really being too big a fan of him in this continuity or in this timeline, being more of an All Might fan. With that being said, or what would happen, is Izuku would get into the ring with Todoroki. Izuku realizing that maybe he should try to push Todoroki to his limits. I mean, he hasn't really seen Todoroki's full power. If he does have another quirk, if he does have fire quirk, the same thing he saw when he taunted him with the headband earlier, then he must be holding back. And in Deku's heart, in his mind, holding back means that you'll never be able to do what you're meant to do. Holding back means you'll never be able to be a real hero and save people when it really comes down to it. As he sees Bakugo, or he sees Todoroki in the ring and in the stands, as he looks right back at Todoroki, ready for the fight of his life. Azuki would have got into a fighting stance as he looked at Todoroki as the fight would have began. The beeper going off and them lunging towards each other. Todoroki would have hit him with a huge barrage of ice pillars, trying to throw him off his rocker. Azuki blocking multiple of the ice pillars and also the giant icicle that was being thrown right at him after the barrage of ice pillars, making him dodge out of the way, but also dodge and block multiple of the making construct pillars and moving the cement to block majority of the attacks. They would try to cut the distance between each other, trying to go faster and faster and dive deeper and deeper towards Todoroki. But Todoroki keeping his distance, not trying to get too close to Izuku, because Izuku's hand-to-hand combat was vastly more superior than his, after him seeing how Izuku was handling himself in hand-to-hand combat against Bakugo. Saw open shot, throwing a huge shard of concrete right towards Todoroki. Todoroki dodging very quickly as Izuku would have grabbed concrete, morphing it into a baton, chucking it like a freaking frisbee right towards Todoroki, hitting him upside the forehead. Todoroki falling down to the ground and making an ice dome around him, blocking him from Izuku's next attack, making a concrete pillar and pretty much throwing it like a baton in the sky. Kind of like a, you know, like those, I don't know how to describe it, those log booby traps that are in the forest when they go flying down, something similar to that. Yeah, basically that's what Izuku would have made, like a concrete log, and would have tried to chuck it at Todoroki. Izuku would be evenly matched, using their abilities to pretty much match each other in well, pretty much constructs, environment, and pretty much reshaping the terrain as it's being shown in front of everybody in the stadium. Izuku using a lot of earthbending to pretty much push and pretty much break through a lot of Izuku, a lot of Deku, a lot of Todoroki's, god dang, a lot of Todoroki's constructs. Trying to keep his distance, but also trying to cut through the amount of ice that was pushed between them. Trying to get a clear shot on him, but Todoroki consistently making multiple icebergs, ice pillars, and ice domes around him, blocking off Izuku, but also hitting Izuku with offensive attacks as Izuku tried to keep his distance and tried not to use too many offensive attacks, but really just trying to do defensive after Todoroki switched to offensive attacks mid-fight, trying to push Izuku out the ring. But Izuku wasn't going to let himself be pushed out the ring that easily, as he would have hit the ground with a huge seismic burst, basically shaking the ground as his nose would start to bleed. Him never really trying this out, but him causing a mini earthquake to happen. Todoroki falling off of one ice construct he made earlier as he would have hit the ground. Multiple of the ice and all sorts of other shards of concrete on the floor would have been shattered into little bits of rock and gravel. A little bit groggy, not really knowing if he could actually do that, but just trying something on the fly. Izuku getting into a fighting stance with Todoroki as they would have looked at each other. Izuku telling Todoroki as they circle around each other that you can't win if you only use 1% of your power. You might think it's your father's quirk, but it's not. Izuku looking at Todoroki as Todoroki be confused what he's talking about. Izuku would have heard how Todoroki, well, Endeavor talked about Todoroki. How he thought and he wanted his son to use his quirk, but it's not his quirk. It's yours, Todoroki. You can't live your whole life trying to prove something to somebody that in the end won't matter. He's your father, yes, but he doesn't define who you are. He doesn't define the man you become. And in all honesty, the hero that you want to become seems to be kind of a joke. What are you talking about? A joke? I mean, real, Todoroki. If you're only going to use half of your power just to spite your father, are you even in it to be a hero? Or are you just here to bring the hero legacy? If you aren't willing to actually do the hard work and put 100% into everything you do, then why the hell are you even here? You're just playing house right now. I'm playing to change the world. I'm doing what I can to make a difference. What are you? A rich spoiled kid trying to prove his daddy that he's different from him? But Todoroki would have gotten pissed as we get hit with a change and a fluctuation of the tension in the match. Shards of rock and pretty much ice would have hit each other, making a huge collide as multiple shards of concrete and ice would have been sent flying everywhere, shrapnel getting sent all over the match, or all over the ring. Izuku would have lunged right towards Todoroki, as Todoroki would have hit him with a clean haymaker of doom, covering his fist in ice, Izuku blocking it with a shield of stone, as a collide would have pushed both of them back. Izuku would have gotten back up, hitting Todoroki with a huge wave of rock, as we see Todoroki hit his awakening move, using his fire and his ice together, having his own flashback moment with his family, his mother, his brothers, and everything that really pushed him to wanting to not use his quirk, but him pushing down those walls just for a moment to win this match. To prove Izuku wrong, but to always and somehow unlock a certain part of him has always been there, but he never really wanted to look deeper and find it. A huge explosion would have erupted between them, Submit trying to stop the match as multiple concrete pillars would be put up, but a collision would have still happened. Multiple shards of concrete, rock, and rubble and sand would have been everywhere around the match. Todoroki being kind of burnt, charred, and also frozen a little bit, as he would have looked around, trying to figure out what Todoroki or what Deku was, but Izuku was across the ring, and in a crater outside of the ring, on the side of the stadium. Izuku was knocked out, and he was beaten, but Izuku did kind of put up a good match. I mean, considering that he had a shard of stone through Todoroki's leg. He and Deku were sent to recovery go pretty quickly and were patched up pretty well. After that would happen, we see the fight between Todoroki and Bakugo would have happened, as it would have had the same outcome. Everybody would have gotten their, matches or their middles or whatever. Bakugo getting first place, Todoroki getting second place, and Deku getting third place. Deku and Todoroki actually would have met up in the hallways after the announcements, as Todoroki would have thanked Izuku. He's not saying that he's, not too fond of the way he talked to him, but he respects Izuku for simply talking at all, for trying to push himself to his limits and actually trying to Todoroki not really knowing the words to say, but Deku would just tell him that it's fine, and that he's here to help no matter what. I might seem cocky or arrogant sometimes when we're in class, but I do care about other people. I mean, it's the one thing my mom taught me to do and wanted me to learn more than anything in the world when I was little. So yeah, I try to help when I can, even when the people I'm helping aren't that good. They would have chuckled, as a relationship and a friendship between Todoroki and Izuku would have flourished, their friendship being stuff of the legend, and being a pretty key part of the story for this series. But nonetheless, we could switch to the next arc. Time would have passed just like an original, and the days to follow would have came to the same, conclusion. Them trying to find a class rep, and also Izuku and the rest of the students figuring out their hero names. Izuku would land on a name that showed power, but also something that would change the world and shake, the world itself. He wanted a name that could show hope, but also fear, strength, stability, and also was a key correlation to his quirk or his power. So Izuku landed on the name Earthshaker, and I don't think I'm ever going to narrate his name as Earthshaker, maybe back and forth, but yeah, the main three names I'm going to be using for the narration for Izuku is Deku, Izuku Midoriya, or Earthshaker, but mostly Izuku or Deku. But with that being said, Ibra would have still picked her hero name, and I'm pretty sure I'm not even saying her real name. I think Ibra is her hero name, but I ain't really gonna get into specifications. Amongst all of that, a couple of the other students would have still had their, hero names be picked out the same. Eventually, the students would have been told to figure out what hero internships they would be going to. Izuku would have gone through the mail, being at home, and trying to check out who wanted him there. He got some, offers to some other places, including, Todoroki's family hero company, aka Endeavor's hero organization. But as he would have looked at other people, he would have saw one note that stood out in green lettering and kind of old, timey type of print, like a family crescent. As he would have looked at it, as he would have looked back into his room, picking up an old picture of his mother in a wrestling costume, seeing a symbol on her neck. A symbol on her outfit that was the same crest as what was on the letter. He would have opened the letter pretty quickly, it being from an estate a few miles on the shores or the outcoast of Japan, as it would have been in the countryside. Azuka being confused on what this was, but looking closer to it, as it would have been a heartfelt letter from a woman named Beifong, being thrown off by this name. Him looking closer to it, getting an address, and getting a heartfelt letter that this woman was, Azuku's grandmother on his mother's side, and that she wanted to reach out to him, seeing him on the USJ and also the news companies and it was going on about, the UA and all of this stuff, but also the sports festival as well, as he would be intrigued. All the other letters were cool and all, but technically she was a pro hero. Learning that his grandmother in this letter and doing a little bit of searching and googling that his grandmother was actually a pro hero back in the golden age of heroing, and was a pretty good pro hero at that, at least the top 20, top 10. Azuku would have been kind of thrown off by this, not really knowing why he never heard of her before. Azuku would have instantly wanted to go here, wanting to learn more about his family, because he didn't know much about his mother's side. I mean, after she died, only thing he really knew was just his uncle, and his uncle barely went into detail about his childhood with his father. So Azuku had to figure out who he was. And with everything change happening, especially at the sports festival, he had to learn more about who his family was, as Azuku would instantly go over there, as that would be his journey for these internships. Oh, just for a disclaimer, his grandmother is still technically a pro hero, but she's kind of retired, on top of the fact that she still technically legally on paper has a hero organization, but it's really just her and one other person from a old ancestor family friend. Azuku would have gotten there, knocking on the front door, waiting for a response, but hearing none of it. The door being open, and Azuku would have opened it, seeing a muscular but yet old looking woman, only maybe in her 40s or 50s, stretching and getting into a fighting style, doing some sort of kung fu, or I guess you could say, I don't even know how to describe this. I ain't gonna hold you. Deku was in shock. Azuku would have asked, who the lady's name was, as she would have said that I'm Kara. I'm your grandmother. Azuku being confused, saying, so, wait, I thought you were dead. I mean, the only other family member that was alive that the police, hit me with was my uncle. Well, he was the closest relative to you at the time. I was out in country, and I was doing some business, and trying to find out, and I got pulled into a little bit of trouble, but I saw you on the USJ, and not the USJ, but I saw you at the sports festival, and I wanted to reach out. I'm sorry I wasn't here for you when you needed me the most. I'm sorry I wasn't there for your mother's funeral. I'm sorry. It's fine, I guess. It's kind of shocking that I have a family member that was a pro hero, and somehow it has the same quirk as me. Well, that's the thing. I brought you here to tell you about your family, but also to figure out what you got. Azuku being thrown off guard, as she would have said that this is your internships, right? Well, I'm going to teach you how to use your power better, and how to actually unlock your true potential. Granted, you're kind of a beginner, but after what I saw you do at the sports festival, you're kind of a prodigy. But I gotta see what you got. Let's go. As they would have walked through the corridors, eventually getting into the back area, seeing an arena around a Japanese garden, as it would have been made out of stone. Azuku and her would have looked off at each other, as the same arena would be kind of built like the sports festival arena, kind of like a stone platform, but surrounded by the Japanese garden, decor and everything along those lines, and rivers around it. Azuku would be told to get on the other side, as he would have been told to take his shoes off and to get into his fighting tactic and to get into his fighting skill. Azuku would have gotten suited up in his hero costume, as his grandmother would have gotten into a fighting stance, telling him that he better be ready. we see them get into this fight, as multiple shards of rock and stone would have been thrown towards each other. Deku started to dodge out of the way pretty quickly, as he would have started to hit her with multiple shards of rock and stone right towards her, as he would have seen her dodge with so much swiftness and just waviness to it, but also dodging and putting in a lot of just a grounded fighting technique, as she only dodged about 2 or 3 times before she just started freaking parrying the shit out of all of Izuku's attacks. Stone being turned into sand before they even hit her, or her just straight up deflecting them with the wave of her hand. Izuku would hit her with more and more attacks, trying to go on the full offensive, but she would have started to parry all of them, even throwing more and most of them right back at him like a boomerang. Izuku would dodge out of the way multiple times, as he would have hit her with a huge boulder, chucking it right towards her, as she would have dodged it, grabbing the boulder, chucking it right towards him trying to block it, as it would have been, well, pretty much turning to sand, wrapping around him and turning it into solid stone mid-fight. As she would have looked at him, saying, "Interesting, you're good." But again, Izuku would have broken out of the sand with the help of her, as they would have gone another round. Izuku would have went straight into the defensive, making multiple pretty much rock constructs, trying to block multiple of the attacks. But out of nowhere, he would have saw a hand of stone wrap around his arm. Him being confused by this, as he's never tried to make organic constructs with his bending, as he was thrown across the ring into the riverside on the Japanese garden, cutting out of the river or the pond, as he would have been covered in water, looking at his grandmother saying, "What the heck? What was that?" Her smiling and saying, I guess you already know what you're capable of, huh? A few hours would have passed by, as the fighting would have gotten more furious, and they would have been going back and forth into sparring, and just straight up teaching each other how to use their bending better. But the next day, Izuku had a good grasp on how to use organic constructs within bending, making earth hands, fists, legs, and other things like that. Also get faster with being able to dematerialize rock into sand and materialize sand into rock or stone, being pretty fast at it, around almost being able to do it in under a second. Izuku would have been incredibly happy by this, as he made great progress simply just from learning from someone that had almost the exact same quirk as him. But his grandmother would have told him that he needs to know a secret. He needs to know exactly what he's capable of, as she's going to teach him exactly what he can do, or at least the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. Izuku's confused as they get into a fighting stance, as it's around, morning time, as Izuku gets into a boxing position, trying to switch it up a little bit, as she would have smiled saying, "Boxing? Reminds me of my good old days." Izuku and her would have gone into a fighting style, would just charge at each other. Her getting real grounded, making multiple pillars around Izuku, throwing them right into him. Izuku making a pillar right underneath himself, jumping himself forward over the pillars, dodging them pretty quickly, hitting her with a somersault straight to the noggin. Her dodging mostly out of the way, as the side of her head would have get clicked or pretty much nicked by Deku's ankle. She would have gotten a little bit thrown off guard, but her smiling and saying, "That's all you got," as she would have hit her with a huge burst of sand, basically using it like airbending, pushing him almost out of the ring. But him grabbing himself, making multiple pretty much concrete chains / hooks, kind of like scorpions type of hooks, pillaring or pretty much anchoring himself to the ground. Izuku smiling at this and actually being pretty impressed that he's this fast thinking now, as he's able to concentrate and make pretty much rock constructs and things like that really fast and actually way more proficiently. Izuku would have hit her with multiple attacks using the chains like a long-range weapon, but her grabbing them and dematerializing them into sand, overpowering him in his bending. Him being thrown off guard, him not knowing that they could do that. Her dodging right towards him, as she would have hit him with a huge haymaker of doom, knocking him to the ground. Izuku would have hit her with a huge wave of sand, trying to mimic what she did earlier with trying to use the sand as like air bending, or kind of like moving it like air or smoke. Her stopping the sand midway and chucking it back on Izuku. Izuku would have hit her with a huge haymaker of doom, using a giant rock construct to push her in the ground, as she would have gotten up, dispersing the rock construct, as she would have shot a huge frame of metal spikes towards Izuku. Izuku being thrown off guard, not knowing what the hell is going on, as metal was thrown into the equation. He made multiple pillars and multiple walls in front of the spikes, most of the walls being cracked and ripped apart, as one spike would almost hit him about 2 or 3 inches away from his body. Azuku was shocked by this, as the middle will start to dematerialize into a liquid material kind of like mercury being formed into a middle spear, as it would have landed across the garden on a nearby shrine. Azuku would look at his grandmother being confused, saying, "What the hell is that? How did you do that?" It's a lot you don't know. And you've been here for about 2 days. I think it's time to show you exactly what you are. As him being kind of confused, as they would have gotten up, Azuku would put an ice pack on, but as they go down into the basement, seeing multiple corridors and pretty much rooms, seeing a couple shrines to other people dressed in the same material, clothing, and kind of, I guess we could say, uniform Azuku's hero costume is based off of, on top of what his mother wore. They eventually make it to a shrine with a woman, the same woman he saw in the arena at the sports festival. Azuku was confused, thrown off, and discombobulated even. Him asking, "What is this? What's going on?" As his grandmother, Kara, would have started to explain exactly how he can do the things he can do. Azuku isn't a quirk user. He's an Earthbender. Benders have been around for generations, decades even, going as far back as time itself. Around the first couple of benders, around like, a few couple decades ago, a few thousand years away. It was legends of the Avatar, a man that could use all 4 elements. It was 4 elements that multiple nations could bend and manipulate: fire, water, earth, and air. All these places lived in harmony until the 100-Year War happened. The Avatar saved it after, disappearing but coming back, and just a couple other things happened. But you're part of the Earthbenders, or the Earth Nation, I guess that's the best way I can explain it. Your mother was also an Earthbender as well, and so am I. Most people in our family have been Earthbenders, but it's been kind of, rare ever since. Ever since quirks started to appear in the world, before quirks even started happening, bending started to become a rarity. Most people that were benders went into hiding, or most of them just carried the gene but weren't actually benders themselves. But as time passed, most benders started resurfacing after quirks, and most people that were benders just thought they were quirk users until they were found about another bender, or either they found out they can do more extraordinary things, just not possible with the quirk. Around 5% of the human population are quirk users, and the other percent are either non-quirk users or straight up quirk users, like, Ken and, Azuku, or he wasn't a quirk user, he got a quirk, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, so that being said, Azuku is told the truth behind benders, and how there's a whole other subspecies of people with powers that aren't quirk users. They're benders. They can bend elements and do extraordinary things like lightning bending and other sub-bending like that. Azuka doesn't know just yet about the other sub-bendings, but he does and is going to learn pretty much a lot about earthbending. He also is told about the legacy of their family, the Beifongs, and how his great-great-great-great, or his ancestor, was Toph Beifong, one of the strongest earthbenders to ever live, and was able to develop middle bending, the same thing I won our fight with, as she promises to teach Azuku how to middle bend. As Azuku's ecstatic by this, as he actually is really excited to learn about middle bending. Azuku starts his training about middle bending pretty fast, but after or before that, he does ask about his mother, about what happened to her if this whole other side of the world existed, as she would have gotten quiet, saying that she doesn't really know exactly. But we'll very soon, realize that his mother is hiding more than she's giving out. He was told that his mother got into boxing and also got into wrestling, and she did her sparring gig, and she settled down and had you with your father. Never liked the man, but he treated your mother good. As Azuku and her start to reminisce about her daughter and Azuku's mom, going back and forth and just talking and spending time with each other. Eventually, Izuku kind of takes it pretty well, not really going against it too badly. He's given concrete proof after one of the residents at the Bayfront Estate, aka a brown-haired boy with Water Tribe outfit or Water Tribe modern outfit on, pretty much gives him a DNA test and more or less a genetic testing scan, telling him that he doesn't actually have a gene or anything along those lines, and can't or doesn't have a quirk in general, as he's kind of surprised by this. But he goes right back on the train with his grandmother pretty quickly. Realizing his true potential, Izuku asks, is he a good bender? As she says, you're a decent bender, but you're not a bender, technically. You used martial arts because you felt like it felt good, it moved, it helped you use your bending more fluently. But that's not the way you're really supposed to do it. Now, you got creative with it, but I'm going to teach you traditional way of bending, I guess. As the days pass, as Izuku learns the basics of actual earthbending from ancient scrolls and also his grandmother's already profound and actually kind of perfected earthbending style, being able to blend traditional earthbending styles with actual hand-to-hand combat and modern techniques. Izuku even further making it better using his already learned fighting style with the traditional sense of earthbending and movements of it. Izuku also learns how to use seismic sense after his grandmother blindfolds him, pits him underneath, pretty much the basement area, and tells him to fight her. As it goes pretty bad the first time, Izuku getting his ass handed to him, but it proceeds to get better and better as Izuku is able to pick up on seismic sense pretty good, actually realizing and actually straight up figuring out exactly why he felt like he fought better with him being barefoot. And also pretty much earthbending came with a lot of extra powers he never thought were possible. He has an extra sense now, being able to pretty much but more or less pick up on vibrations on the ground through earth, being able to be a pretty good seismic user, actually being able to pick up on it pretty quickly, being at the level as Toph. Izuku would be pretty good at this, being kind of surprised that he's been able to pick up on it pretty quickly, especially his grandmother being also surprised as well. Maybe it was in the blood. Izuku would have also went deep into middle bending after he would have mastered seismic sense. He would have really not mastered it, but he would have figured out how to use it to its fullest potential, despite him being able to actually still see. But yeah, Deku would pick up on middle bending really fast. I mean, he was a prodigy, I'm not gonna lie. Deku would pick up on middle bending pretty quickly, being able to do it pretty fast. Only at first being able to bend it when he was touching middle, but as the days and hours pass by, he gets pretty proficient at it. But he still is kind of a newbie at it, and not at the same level as Toph was in the newer continuity, or at the level as Toph's children were, but pretty decent nonetheless. Izuku would have pretty much been able to get a pretty good grasp and almost master seismic sense, and also having a pretty good grasp on middle bending, and also being able to master base earthbending pretty well and become even better with it with the help of his grandmother and traditional bending techniques and practices. They would have went out on the town doing a patrol on that fateful night. The same thing would have happened as the gnomes would have still attacked. Izuku's grandmother and him would have jumped off the train they would have been taking, as she would have told him to watch and learn, as she would have been donning her hero costume back in her prime day. As she would have lunged off, as she would have jumped straight off of the side of the train, as Izuku being thrown off guard, but her and him noticing that she was flying, as she was using middle bending to pretty much propel herself forward, using the shards of middle, or pretty much her middle souls, underneath her feet, kind of levitating and flying across the city. Izuku would be shocked by this, saying that he needs to learn how to do that. Izuku would have jumped off the train again, and right after her, using bending to pretty much make a stone chain, zipping and running right to building, kind of like Spider-Man, pretty much putting a lot of strain on his shoulders, considering that he's not superhuman, but nearly landing in a nearby alleyway, as he would have gone right into trying to save people and helping them out of burning buildings, collapsing buildings, and even stopping some collapsing buildings from even falling over in the first place. Azuka would help out greatly in this whole event, eventually running down the hallways, not the hallways, but the pretty much alleyways of the city, but hearing a scream in the distance. Him using seismic sense to coordinate or pretty much calculate exactly where the scream was from, as he would have lunged right across the city, trying to get there as fast as possible. He eventually would have gotten there right at a certain moment where he saw a man luring over Ida, his classmate. Azuka would have hit him with a mean, swift-ass trash can straight to the noggin using middle bending. Him would have gotten into a fighting stance as they would have been, well, pretty much on a standoff. He would have lunged right towards Deku, Deku dodging multiple of the attacks, and one of the blades grabbing Izuku, but Izuku using middle bending to liquefy the blade before he even touched his skin. Izuku being shocked by this and actually kind of surprised, as he would have been thrown off guard and distracted, just enough for Stain to stab him in his arm. Izuku yelled in pain as he would have fallen to the ground, Stain pulling out the knife, about to lick it, but Izuku would have saw out of nowhere a flame blast right across Stain's face. Stain would have lunged back immediately, dodging out of the way narrowly, having most of Izuku's blood burnt off the blade. Him looking back, seeing Todoroki. Todoroki would have stepped into the arena, or would have basically been the new challenger in the fight, telling Deku to get Ida out of here. Him and Ida would have started to get up, Deku telling Ida to get up and try to, move, him saying that he can't move, it's his quirk. If he licks your blood, he can paralyze you. Izuku yells this information to Todoroki mid-fight as Todoroki says, got it, as he tries to keep his distance away from Stain. Stain still does this little inner monologue about why he thinks, every other pro hero that is, alive is just in it for the money and fame, and they aren't actually real heroes. The only real hero is All Might. Top tier All Might Glazer here. Oh my goodness, man. Get off that man's meat! Anyways, we see Izuku try to dive back into the fight, but trying to keep Ida up and trying to wake him up and get him out of his, mojo. Try to wake him up, again and again and again. Him saying that he can't get up. As Izuku looks at him saying, sorry, gotta take this a little bit, as he takes a gauntlet off of Ida's arm, as he bends it into a shard of steel. As he starts to form it into kind of a bullet type of transformation, trying to get a clean shot on Stain, trying to take out one of his limbs, or trying to get at his foot or something like that, to try to slow him down to give Todoroki a clear, very precise opening so he can just win this fight right here, right now. Stain sees it in the corner of his eye as he dodges the pretty much bullet as soon as Izuku shoots it off, as it slightly grazes Todoroki instead. Todoroki looks back as out of nowhere he gets caught off guard as Stain stabs him and licks his blood. Deku gets pretty much shocked by this as Todoroki falls onto the ground being paralyzed. Stain about to finish the job, but Izuku lunging right towards him, throwing a multitude of brick constructs and brick right at his forehead. Stain dodged out of the way narrowly, but multiple of these pretty much bricks hitting him one by one, kind of like a dodgeball fight. Deku sees this as he gets pissed off as we see Stain try to chuck a knife at him. Izuku dodging out of the way, but the knife pretty much passing by him and heading straight towards Ida. But Ida immediately snaps out of the whole pretty much paralyzation as he dodges quickly out of the way, him helping Izuku in this 2v1 fight. Ida tries to give a diversion to Stain, trying to get his attention away from Izuku, as Izuku lunges right into the fight, trying to go low as Ida goes high. Stain tries to go pretty much 1v2 against these guys, as he's getting overwhelmed by the sheer speed and accuracy of Ida's kicks, but also the sheer strength and absolute crazy technique that Izuku's giving him hand-to-hand combat-wise. Izuku is covering his fist in a thin layer of liquid metal that's kind of hardened, so it's kind of like a very thick silver gloves. Gets into a fight, gets more and more into a boxing type of position and fighting style as he hits Stain multiple times in the lungs and the gut. Eventually Stain is overwhelmed when Izuku pretty much bulks up his entire fist as he hits him with a crazy liver shot, knocking the wind out of Stain's body. Stain gets sent flying into a trash can as Izuku uses middle bending to encase him, or pretty much contain him into a middle box. Stain instantly kicks out the plastic part of the trash can as he lunges out of the way trying to get away. Izuku grabbing him mid-jump with a chain of steel, chucking him down to the ground, knocking him out cold. We see Izuku help up Ida after Ida is kind of tuckered out and has a few stab wounds in his body, as he tells Ida, to take, take it slow, okay? As they're about to go towards Todoroki to help him up, as Todoroki gets a little groggy after seeing from the corner of his eye Stain chuck a knife right at the back of Deku's freaking noggin. Deku at this point is still not a complete master of seismic sense like Toph, so this knife out of nowhere is thrown off guard because, well, his foot was off the ground as he was standing on top of a piece of cardboard and his other foot that was on the concrete was off. Izuku not really having a full grasp on seismic sense and not being as good as other people in his family like his grandmother or Toph or even his mom, as Izuku looks past him or looks behind him at last minute as the knife is right at his forehead. As out of nowhere, Todoroki freezes it solid as it shatters on Izuku's forehead, giving him a few notches, but nothing too crazy to actually kill him or give him permanent damage on his face. Izuku looks up as he sees Stain pass out, as that was his last bit of energy. Deku and Todoroki look at each other as they give each other a nod of understanding, as, well, they get saved last minute or get help last minute by Endeavor's team, and also his grandmother showing up as well. His grandmother showing up there, helping Izuku up and also helping Todoroki up, asking Izuku if he's okay, seeing the notch on his forehead, but him saying that he's fine and he'll be alright, as she says okay, if you say so. As she seems to be pretty overprotective at this point in the story. Well, I mean, she is his grandmother and she wasn't here when he needed him, or when she was needed, but she's here now and she wants to be part of Izuku's life. But whatever. We see Izuku and the rest of the gang get a whole brief about, them technically being able to capture, Stain the hero killer, but also that they don't want to bring any unnecessary attention to the students, so they should just allow, well, Izuku's grandmother, Endeavor, and the other pro heroes to take credit for this whole situation. Deku, Ida, and Todoroki do agree to this, as we get switched the next couple days later after their classmates would have asked them exactly how their internships went, them saying it was pretty chill, pretty alright, but also some of them asking about if they had anything to do with the hero Stain Killer, being pretty much taken down. Them saying, nah, we didn't have nothing to do with that, as they're just kind of looking at them saying, man, boring. Izuku looking at Todoroki and Ida, them having a little bit of their own type of secret between each other, as the friendship between Todoroki and Deku would have become even stronger due to this. With Deku knowing his past and where he came from and exact history behind benders, now he knows he's capable of so much more. At this point in the story, Deku is a master, or knows how to pretty well bend, like he's a prodigy at metal bending, seismic sense, sand bending, and earthbending, being probably the best sandbender we've seen in the Avatar universe, considering that Izuku uses it a lot, especially to dematerialize and rematerialize solids into sand or sand into solid rock or stone. After that, we get switched to the next arc, as Izuku and his relationship with his other classmates and Ibra do and is proceedingly starting to grow and become more intense and more pitiful, or not pitiful, but more critical for his story and for his character. As time passes, we do eventually get them to do their, final exams, going through the written exams and trying to figure out how they're going to, pass the practical exam, hearing a little bit of rumors about how it's going to be based off of robots, as they would have heard that from some Class B students. They would have tried to think about it, as Deku wasn't too, scared, considering that if it was a robot, he'd be able to test out his middle bending. Before that would have happened, they do get told that they're going to be doing a little bit of a relay race, more or less, to figure out where everybody else is at after their whole internships. Izuku is teamed up with characters like Zero, Toji, or Tajiro, I think the teleport guy, Ida, and also Mina. They all do a race against each other through the fake city or the model city that they normally train at. They start the race as Izuku instantly starts to jump to rooftop to pipe to pipe, as he tries to, pretty much, I guess you could say, show off, using middle bending to make a middle spear underneath his body, shooting himself across the sky. Him not really knowing how he's going to land, considering that he's literally flying on a piece of sheet of steel that he threw with his own middle bending, but he doesn't know how to stop. He tries to use middle bending to slow down the velocity of the sheet, slowly floating or kind of levitating, but still moving pretty fast towards the finish line, getting first place actually. doing a little bit of a sprained ankle and almost, kind of hurting himself pretty badly because he's never really tried to repel himself with middle before, as it was a little bit more of a faster descent. But he was able to do a pretty good amount of speed and pull off a good amount of, leverage on his other classmates, being able to jump across the entire fake city in a matter of a few seconds or a few minutes. Izuku does end up getting first place, and Ida second place, and a few others. I think Zero gets second place actually, because using his tape quirk to pretty much swing like Spider-Man to pipe through city to city, or through contract to contract, or building to building. Izuku gets a pretty good score, as everybody's shocked by this, Bakugo especially, because he thought Izuku just was able to manipulate Earth. Izuku and the rest of his classmates, and Ibra included, ask him exactly how he's able to do that. We already see Todoroki and Ida figure out that he was able to manipulate middle on a low scale when he fought Stain, but they never really asked about it, as they would have asked him in more detail after the rest of the classmates would have done their racing, as Izuku would have explained that, well, he actually met his grandmother. He would explain to his friends that his grandmother was actually a pro hero, and that she was actually the top 20, top 10 back in her prime day, and she was one of the Golden Age heroes. She had the same quirk as him, as Deku still had to keep up the whole facade and secret of, benders. So he said she had the same quirk as him and teach them how to use it better, and that there's a lot more to their quirk than meets the eye. Him explaining that he can manipulate pretty much anything Earth-based. I think that's the best way to describe his power to them, as they're kind of, intrigued by this, saying that Izuku has the potential to become one of the best heroes, especially now since he has more limited potential to his power. And Todoroki even asks if he can manipulate glass. Him saying, what you mean, as Izuku would have gotten a little bit of a deeper thought thinking into it, because if he can manipulate anything Earth-based like his grandmother told him, he has limited potential, but he doesn't know how to do that, and maybe it's never been done before. Izuku not having a full breakdown of every sub-bending available, but only being able to learn seismic sense and middle bending when he was with his grandmother and the time they had together. The limited time they had together. The days pass by, and the exams rush in, and they eventually get to their practical exam. They get ready to go as Izuku's teamed up and pretty much suited up in his hero costume, as they're told about how they're going to be fighting their teachers and be teamed up in pairs. Izuku is kind of thrown off, as he's told that he's teamed up with Bakugo. Wait, what the fuck? Izuku is teamed up with Bakugo now, as they both are teamed up to go against their teacher, All Might. Now, with other matches that happen similar the same, nothing really too bad changes. We do see Todoroki does put in a lot of more, does still have the same type of effort and also emotional capacity with Momo, actually pushing Momo to believe in herself more so, especially after her past failures when it came to the sports festival that absolutely humbled the crap out of her, because Dark Shadow or Tokiyami destroyed her. But as she kind of feels and kind of gets back into her mojo and starts to believe in herself and not push herself back anymore with the help of Todoroki, she grows and thrives as a person, and the relationship between the two characters actually becomes a lot more powerful, other than in like canon. Kind of something more like a relationship. But with that being said, we get switched to the other matches, and they go similar the same. I mean, nothing too bad. I mean, with Ibra taking the place of Mineta, she does end up constricting Miss Midnight, and actually putting a bunch of vines around her, making it airtight and sealing it all around her body to make sure her gas doesn't pour out of the arena too fast, giving Denki enough time to get across the map and get to the finish line. As actually, never mind. They just cuff her. They cuff her because she's restrained anyways, so they're able to take her down pretty easily. As they get a pretty good score, even a better score, being able to take down Miss Midnight pretty quickly. Her using her power to keep a distance between her and Miss Midnight, and being able to constrict her. But besides that, nothing really too badly changes from other matches, as we get switched to the main course with Izuku, Bakugo, and All Might's match. He tries to figure out exactly what he's going to do. I mean, how is he going to win against freaking All Might? As he also looks at Bakugo, as Bakugo instantly starts to walk away from him. Deku asks Bakugo where he's going, and he says he's going to be doing his own thing, and he's going to be looking for All Might now. Deku lashes out at him saying, "Where are you going, man? You can't do this alone. We were teamed up for a reason." Him saying, "I don't care about your reasons. I don't care about whatever you think is going to happen, because we're not going to work together. I'm better on my own. Better on your own? Better on your own. I beat you. If you forgot, you got lucky. I got lucky. I I got lucky. Izuku gets thrown off guard when he hears a crash in the distance. As he looks behind Bakugo, as out of nowhere he pushes Bakugo out of the way as a huge gust of wind gets sent flying past them and destroying a car next to them, causing an explosion to break out. Bakugo gets sent flying over the bridge side they're on as Izuku gets to fleeing in the city. He hears crashes behind him as he hears All Might laughing and taunting him. Izuku starts to run as All Might throws a huge cannon, or more or less a Detroit Smash wind pressure attack right towards Izuku. Izuku makes a huge crater around him, or more or less a huge boulder in front of him, blocking the attack, but basically the whiplash of the attack pushes Izuku back into the ground, almost making him, pretty much get knocked out. Izuku gets back up as All Might gets only about 2 feet away from him. Izuku covers his hand in nearby steel from a nearby car as he collides with All Might's fist. He does a lot of middle bending to try to make the fist or the goblin as strong as possible, but as the fist connects, Izuku gets sent flying into a nearby crater. Him turning the crater into sand as half of the bridge side that was over there would have collapsed, giving Izuku enough cover to get into some space and also enough cover to get into a hiding spot, getting out of getting out of the guise of All Might. All Might losing him, but also, well, kind of figuring out where Bakugo was, because Bakugo was using explosions to traverse against the fake city, or the model city. All Might quickly goes after him as a fight ensues between the two giants, or the two quirk users. They go back and forth, right, left, explosion, Detroit Smash after Detroit Smash, as Bakugo is getting absolutely manhandled. He tries to throw one of his gauntlets, but they get cracked instantly right off of his wrist. Bakugo gets grabbed by the wrist of his arm, or by his wrist, and being taunted and being pretty much thrown around. All Might being greatly more powerful than both of these students, but Izuku would have started to think about a plan. As before All Might would have taken out Bakugo and knocked him out, Izuku hits All Might with a huge amount of middle, aka Izuku bends the most amount of middle he's ever been in his life, as he throws an entire freaking truck right at All Might. All Might gets sent a little bit a ways away, as he's a little bit dazed, giving enough cover for him and Bakugo to get out of there. As Deku and Bakugo are re-evaluate, or I guess we could say re-evaluate what they're doing and what their plan is. Bakugo instantly just tells Deku to back off as he can handle this, as Izuku tells him to shut up. Bakugo's pissed off as he says, "You don't tell me to shut up! I know we had our differences in the past, and I know for some reason you don't like me. But I don't care anymore, Bakugo. We're almost grown. We're not kids anymore. Stop acting like whatever you're going through doesn't affect everybody else that you're working with. You're constantly mad. You're constantly pissed off at the world. Stop it. It doesn't help you do anything. It just makes you insufferable. No one likes to be around you, and Kirishima's the only person that actually likes you. You're a horrible person. You need to start realizing that more now than ever, because no one wants an asshole to save them." Bakugo gets pissed off as Deku slaps him, saying to shut up. That we're gonna win this together, either if he likes it or not. They're gonna work as a team because that's the only way they can win against All Might. Bakugo gets silent as he agrees, realizing that he's being hot-headed and actually just straight up an asshole. As he kind of lets it chill by, as he says he's not forgiving Izuku or even going to become friends with him, but they need to work together to win this exam, as they both pit their heads together as they make a plan. Bakugo gets sent flying, or more or less explodes himself trying to get to the finish line, as All Might quickly follows after him. But out of nowhere, we see Bakugo land narrowly into a pit of sand, as All Might blasts through the sand with a Detroit Smash, but him getting met with a explosion, or more or less a goblet pull, right at the forehead of his noggin by Deku. The shockwave is sent flying, as we see Bakugo, his whole time they were hiding, was sweating as much as he can in the gauntlet, giving it as much as a punch as it could possibly give. The shockwave gets sent flying everywhere as All Might gets sent flying away. He does end up pretty much jumping or super jumping right back into the fight, hitting Deku with a huge Detroit Smash, but Deku bends a huge amount of stone between the punch and him, causing the shockwave to push Izuku only about 6 to 7 feet in the floor. As Deku gets back up, coughing up some blood, as All Might looks at Deku and looks at Bakugo, about to hit Bakugo with a pretty much wind pressure attack, but out of nowhere, Izuku starts to bend the sand around him like an airbender, wrapping it around All Might's fist, and pretty much giving him enough, or giving Bakugo enough wiggle room to get out of the ring and win. As All Might is actually surprised that they were able to work together, and is actually pretty happy now, because they were put together for the simple reason of, well, getting past their differences and working together. But after that whole event, Izuku and Bakugo win a little differently, but almost exactly the same, as Bakugo takes a run for it. With that being said, or with that happening, nothing too different changes from the original story. The people that did fail, they do end up having to do some extra credit and more or less some extra work. But they all end up still going to the forest training arc, or the forest training, to try to figure out where they're at this point in the story, and also give them a better level of training. Now, that being said, Izuku does end up going to the mall, as he does end up shopping with Ibra instead of Uraka, as Uraka actually ends up having a lot more of a complex relationship, or going deeper into talking to characters like Bakugo, as she kind of sees Bakugo change a little bit through the whole interaction he had with Deku those days ago. As she does end up going shopping with Bakugo instead of Deku, as Deku ends up going shopping with Ibra. And Deku spend a good amount of time together, but they get separated when Ibra has to go to the restroom, and Deku's left in the lobby area, or in the hallways, more or less the open area of the mall. The same area original Izuku would have been left at. Izuku's about to go on his own journey, or just wait for it to get out of the store, but he feels a hand on his neck. He's about to fight back, but he hears a familiar voice. Shigaraki. He remembers Shigaraki's voice from the time they fought in the USJ, as their same conversation happens just like in original canon. Shigaraki tries to figure out why he hates Stain and Izuku so much, and then he lands on the fact that Izuku and Stain both idolize All Might, and that's the person that in his heart of hearts he needs to eradicate. He needs to get rid of the symbol of hope for his dreams to come reality, for his predecessor's dream, for his his master's dream to come true. As he immediately dips out after Ibra confronts him, as she takes the same spot as Uraka had in the original canon, throwing off, pretty much Shigaraki not looking for a big fight, as he walks off. He immediately disappears in the crowd of people after Izuku tries to find him with seismic sense, but somehow he's gone. Izuku looks back at Ibra as he kind of is flustered. He immediately talks to one of the heroes and is able to get his hands and directly talk to All Might through Aizawa. They talk as All Might subconsciously thinks to himself about what to do next. He tells Izuku that he did good and that he handled the situation well. He walks off as Izuku asks him exactly why Shigaraki say those things about him. As All Might gets cold as he says nothing to be worried about, young Midoriya, as he walks off. Izuku being confused and kind of being more intrigued about the real, mystery behind All Might. With that being said, we get switched sometime later, as we get hit with the Forest Lodge, or the pretty much mountain training arc, as everybody is pretty much told that they're going to be doing a training camp during the summertime. As everybody is told to get on the bus, as they eventually make it on a nearby lodge area, being told about how they're going to be trained by a famous pro hero team, the Wild Pussycats. Izuku actually being kind of cheesing, as he was actually a really big fan of Pixie Bob when he was younger, considering that he actually had a little bit of a crush on her when he was a kid. It's that the group is told that they're going to be going across the forest, trying to get to the lodge on foot by noon. And if they don't get there by noon, no lunch, muchacho! So they got to get going. We also get introduced to the rest of the Wild Pussycats, characters like Tiger, Ragdoll, Pixie Bob, like earlier, and Mandalay. And pretty much I think that's it. That's all the Wild Pussycats. So they're told to get going, as they're immediately thrown off the side of the cliff into the forest. Falling, he starts to bend the earth around him to cushion his blow by turning half of the cliffside into sand, making it into like a sand pile, and pretty much cushioning his blow and a few other students' blows as they fall quickly right after Deku. Deku starts to quickly run through the forest after seeing a bunch of dirt monsters start to surround the students. Izuku instantly starts to bend earth, shooting multiple shards of rock and pillars and multiple spikes off the ground to throw off the monsters, allowing most of the students and Izuku especially to get past the forest area pretty quickly, him traversing through it pretty well, nicely actually, using his sand bending to make whips and chains to swing to pretty much tree to tree like Spider-Man. He eventually makes it to the lodge, one of the first students actually there, as he makes it pretty there about 20-30 minutes before everybody else. He does end up still trying to shake hands and meet up with Koda, but Koda, knocks him in the booty. Excuse me. He does immediately put the paws on Koda. Koda immediately punches him in the nards. But besides that, we get switched with Izuku and the rest of the group getting lunch or getting dinner, I guess, and also going to the hot springs to get a good, nice bath. That whole arc kind of gets skimmed over a little bit, considering that Mineta doesn't really go up there and throw off everything, causing causing fall over. So Koda never falls over in this continuity. We do still see some other more complex narration where we see Izuku actually meet up with Mandalay in the hallway as he is asked about Koda and why he was so mean to him earlier. He kind of explains a little bit about Koda's past and kind of goes a little bit into how his past was kind of thrown off due to his parents' death. Deku gets a little bit of a backstory about who his parents were, how they were pro-heroes, they died fighting a villain. And Izuku gets that information in a whole different way, but he still gets it either way. Some time later passes and nothing really changes too much besides Izuku's training. Izuku does start to train with Pixie Bob more than anybody because she fits his quirk better. Izuku does know how to do hand-to-hand combat as he does learn a little bit more about how to throw a solid punch and also uses bending with his fighting with the help of Tiger and Pixie Bob. He does end up splurting the whole thing that he was kind of had a crush on her when he was a little boy, as she felt kind of old, but nonetheless they go deeper into their training. Izuku does end up pretty much actually giving her a little pointers and does end up teaching her how to use seismic sense, or at least the best she can do, because she's not actually an earthbender. She can only manipulate earth. So she is kind of just told about how he does it as she tries to mimic it, but with her heels and stuff, it doesn't really work too much with her hero costume, and she would have to redesign her whole entire thing, so she ain't gonna do it. But she does know how to use it slightly. That being said, Izuku does end up learning a little bit more about how he can use his bending to make organic shapes more accurate than what he's been using with like making hand constructs and fist constructs like his grandmother taught him. He does learn how to make more organic shapes like feet, hands, even organic type of rock clones, making it so that he's a lot more advanced in terms of his earthbending than any other earthbender ever recorded. The students progressively become better with using their quirks and get better in training alongside their peers and other teachers. Eventually, the villains come to play. Class 1B does show up as well through that time, as everyone else is doing their thing, as majority of the original continuity of the anime does play out the same. But the only real difference is that Izuku was being trained by Pixie Bob and Tiger, as he's kind of getting better with hand-to-hand combat, even more so than he already was, considering that he was a pretty good combat strategist, as he was even more betterly combat improved than I can't remember his name, but Tailquirk guy. I'm really gonna name him. I'm really gonna just narrate him as Tailquirk guy, because he's not really an important character to me personally. I'm sorry, guys. His quirk is kind of buns. Your quirk is a tail. Come on now, man. But he does end up becoming... Actually, I didn't really put this in the story, but Deku does end up actually becoming friends with him, considering that their powers are not the same at all, but their fighting strategies are slightly similar, considering that Izuku does put in a lot of hand-to-hand combat in his fighting as well, as he wants to be able to do long range and short range and up close attacks as well, than sticking to just long range bending attacks. Deku's training late at night, trying to get better at his bending, as he hears a commotion in the distance. As out of nowhere, a shard of flames, or a cloud of flames, starts to erupt in the forest, as majority of the forest is covered in blue flames. As out of nowhere, he sees lightning bolts be struck out of the sky. like someone's shooting someone with lightning. He thinks it's Denki, but Denki's electricity has never been, well, blue. He tries to rush back into the building as he hears an explosion pop off. Out of nowhere, he hears multiple of the students start to panic as we hear a telepathic connection from Mandalay. Mandalay telling the students that the villains are attacking. Izuku instantly tries to figure out where the hell Kota is, as he does remember the whole conversation he had with Kota, or his time he tried to comfort Kota doing the lunch earlier, where he tried to meet up with him on the cliffside. He realizes where Kota could be right now, as he needs to get to him right now. He's in danger, as Mandalay tells him that and tells him to go get him. Izuku instantly starts to run up the cliffside, going through the forest as fast as he can. He eventually makes it to the cliffside as he tries to confront Kota and tell him that they need to go now and that the villains are attacking. Kota doesn't listen to him, but soon they get interrupted when they hear a loud thud behind them, as they see a muscular man, clouded in black, looking over them. As he starts to chuckle and smile, Izuku grabbing Kota and pinning him behind him, telling Kota to stay close and let's get out of here. But the man telling them that they're not going anywhere and that both of them are going to die tonight. The man instantly rips off his cloth or his cloak as he reveals to be the same man that killed Kota's parents. Muscular. Tells Kota to run now, as Kota doesn't think he can. I mean, if this man is the same person that killed his family, what is Izuku of all people are going to do? Izuku tells Kota that he needs to get out of here now, as out of nowhere in between Deku's conversation, he gets hit with a mean haymaker out of nowhere as Muscular clocks him in the front of the noggin. Izuku gets sent flying into the side of the cliff, causing a crater to be formed. Izuku falling down at the ground and almost being knocked out cold. As Muscular looks over to Izuku and Kota, smiling and saying this is going to be fun. As he throws a huge punch towards Kota, trying to splat him in one go, as Deku hits him with a huge pillar of sand right in the side of his body, hardening it and throwing him down to the ground. Kota instantly sees this as he tries to run for it, as a huge puff of smoke starts to be erupted around Muscular. As a huge cloud of sand is thrown everywhere as Muscular breaks through the sand or the hardened sand around him. He lunges immediately towards Deku as Deku dodges multiple of his attacks, but getting thrown off guard when a huge, I mean a heavy, nasty knee straight to the face goes off. Izuku gets sent flying about 6 feet up in the sky as Muscular grabs him by the ankle, throwing him back down into the ground like Hulk did Loki in Avengers. I mean, like straight up giving him belt to ass. It's back up as he hits Muscular with a huge shard of sand bending, trying to cover him in sand and trying to stick him to a solid position, trying to harden the sand around him, but Muscular is consistently breaking through the sand bending as Izuku is using it. Izuku is getting overwhelmed at this point as Muscular is just hitting him with a barrage of punches, lunges, smacks, and kicks, being overwhelmed by the brute strength that Muscular has. He was trying to mimic his strategy he had against All Might, but granted, All Might was holding back, but nonetheless, Izuku had to figure out how to take this guy out now, as he couldn't go toe-to-toe with him with brute strength. He had to use technique. He had to use his head. Covered his body in a thin layer of sand, hardening it and making a rock armor. He instantly goes toe-to-toe with this man, dodging multiple of these attacks, but also getting hit a few times on his arms, legs, and ribs, as majority of the rock armor, padded with sand underneath, is able to absorb majority of the injury or majority of the force, but he still gets sent flying into the side of the cliff. Izuku is getting hit with barrages of punches over and over and over again as he tries to grab onto some sort of rock to protect him, making multiple domes of stone around him and Kota. Muscular is focusing solely on Deku, about to take him out, as Izuku tries to focus. He tries to lock in, he tries to focus on something he can bend, something more than just a rock around him, as he feels a vibration underneath his feet. He feels something he could definitely use to win this, as he senses a shard of metal on Muscular's face, his robotic eye. Before Izuku can bend anything, Muscular hits him with a crazy left hook that breaks right through his defensive armor, knocking him down to the ground. As Muscular is consistently putting more and more pressure on Izuku trying to bend his more and more rock around him, trying to dodge or trying to block majority of the force, just more and more shards of rock are starting to dig into Izuku's body as they're starting to shatter and break and scrape off his skin. Izuku's arm starts to buckle and it eventually breaks and cracks as Izuku yells out in pain. Izuku tries to lock in, He tries to stay focused, but he's losing consciousness slowly, as Izuku thinks about it as he has no other choice. Before anything else can happen, he feels a water fall on his face as Kota shoots water right towards Muscular, giving Izuku just enough time to, well, put his game face on. As Izuku starts to bend the middle around Muscular's face, as Muscular starts to instantly lunge away, trying to figure out what's happening, as Izuku tells Muscular that he's sorry, as Izuku bends the rod of middle around Muscular's robotic eye, turning it into a shard of middle, and sticking it right through his brain. Muscular falls onto the ground, as Deku thinks he's dead. He just killed a man. As Izuku calms down as he hears a heartbeat. Not his or Kota's, but as his feet were exposed and majority of the rock around him was shotted off, or pretty much broken off, majority of his shoes were ripped off as his soles were on the floor. As Izuku starts to sense that it's a third heartbeat on the cliff. Muscular is alive. Izuku instantly gets up as he checks it himself as he puts his hand on Muscular's chest, as Muscular is still alive, but it's a very faint heartbeat, as he's trying to figure out what happened. Muscular should be dead, but maybe he's just that strong. He immediately grabs Kota as he bends a ton of rock over Muscular, trying to bury him alive. Him and Kota eventually run off as Deku starts to limp a little bit, having a few sprained muscle groups and also having a shattered arm. He tries to get out of there as fast as possible, Kota asking him if he's okay, and Izuku says he is. Izuku quickly spins some dirt around his arm, making like kind of a, I guess you could say, makeshift cast around his arm, covering it in sand. Dirt. Izuku eventually makes it to the lodge as he sees Mandalay and a few other pussycats fighting against Magnum and also Spinner. He instantly takes down Spinner as he makes a huge crater around him as he covers him in sand, basically burying him all the way to his shoulders and down, as his head is the only thing exposed. Izuku instantly goes toe-to-toe with Magnum as they go fight as Izuku starts to use his middle bending against him, going toe-to-toe, blow to blow. He does overwhelm him with his middle bending as he hits him back with multiple shards of his own attacks, as he does end up taking him out pretty quickly. Izuku helps the rest of the team, or the rest of the students, as he tries to get deeper and deeper into the forest, trying to figure out where Bakugo is, as none of the students can find out where he is, or where everybody else is, as they're scattered around the entire forest. Izuku eventually makes it and meets up with Shinso and a few others. What Shinso end up pretty much teaming together, as Shinso and Deku's conversations are kind of cringy, more or less, or not really cringy, but kind of a tension between them, as Deku isn't trying to hear anything he's trying to say to him, considering that he talked about some very personal shit and aired it out to the entire world on the sports festival. They eventually do end up meeting up with what was it? I forgot his name. Soji, Dupla Arms, as he also ends up meeting up with Kiyomi, as it's not as a friendly encounter as he thought it would be, as well, Kiyomi's quirk is becoming incredibly dangerous, as his dark shadow is becoming insatiably dangerous, honestly, as it's starting to fight back against the other students. They start to get away from it, trying to run it and lure it to the other groups and the other students, as they eventually make it to Todoroki, Ida, and a few others. They fight against Dark Shadow, as they end up using Dark Shadow as kind of a weapon, gearing it towards other people like Moonstar and other people, or Moonfish, or Fish Moon. I forgot his name. I'm not gonna hold you. He had a wicked ass quirk, but I don't know. The rest of the Class 1A and Class 1B team up together to take down these villains, as they end up winning pretty quickly. Izuku does use Earthbending to help throughout the fight, but nothing really too different happens in this part of the story. We get switched a little ways away, as later in the fight or later in the night, there's a few other Class 1B students. They also come across Ibra, as Izuku and Ibra do end up hugging each other, as Izuku assumed that she was hurt and somewhere else he couldn't find, because he couldn't sense her. but she explains to him that she's fine and she's okay. They end up hugging again, as pretty much Ida just smiles, saying, "So, are y'all a thing?" As Kirishima also smiles as well. But Azuki just tells them to shut up, as they check a little bit, but they get thrown off guard when they hear a lightning strike nearby. They're confused on where that's coming from, as out of nowhere Azuki feels something in the distance. He feels something around him, as his body starts to sense the floor around him, as at this point Azuki's barefoot. Azuki looks over as he sees a lightning bolt strike right towards him. Azuki narrowly dodges out of the way, pushing multiple of the other students out of the way using Earthbending. Azuku's right arm is grazed by it, as Azuki falls down to the ground being electrocuted. Azuki falls down on the ground, being straight up knocked out. He fades to black, as majority of everything that happens in the night plays out the same. People like Mr. Compress, Dobby, and a few others end up fighting the other students. Bakugo is still taken away, as the other students are able to still save the other students as well, or the other people. But nonetheless, Bakugo is still captured, and majority of the pro villains, or more or less the League of Villains, are able to escape. Muscular is taken into custody, as we're found out that Muscular has brain damage now, and he might be pinned to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. But he's not dead, so I guess it's a win-win. Another thing, Spinner is also captured, and majority of the villains that were taken down are captured, just like in original canon. Only real difference is that through that night, when Azuki was separated from the rest of the group after he got struck by lightning, Azuki woke up in the middle of the forest, being dragged away from the rest of the group, as Azuki was confused on where he was. But out of nowhere, he hears a crackling noise behind him as he dodges out of the way, as a huge barrage of flames start to hit him all around him. Azuki used multiple layers of earthbending and sandbending to block majority of the fire attacks, as he blocks as he eventually hides behind a tree. He asks what's going on, as he yells out in the distance, as a man answers him. Azuku Midoriya. It's been a long time since I've seen an Earthbender. Azuku starts to get shocked, as he's confused on how this man knows who he is. You're probably wondering how I know you're a bender. It's not too hard to notice. I mean, you're worldwide at the sports festival. I'm pretty sure every other bender on the planet saw you. I'm not here to kill you. I'm just here to see what you're capable of. And it seems to me that you're not capable of much if you're hiding behind that tree. Azuku instantly instantly jumps out of the way of the tree, as a huge ball of lightning starts to get struck right through the tree. Azuku dodges out of the way as he looks up, as he sees a man clad in black. A man starts to shoot multiple flames towards him, and Azuku starts to dodge a majority of them, but getting glazed by the arm and legs most of the time throughout the fight. Azuku instantly dodges out of the way of the next fire attack, it burning right through the tree. Azuku starts to run around the forest trying to get away from this man, as out of nowhere he starts to dodge more and more attacks of fire blast and attacks from multiple different angles, like he's fighting multiple different people. He starts to lunge right towards the man, as he have a bend off, or more or less a duel, as Azuki uses multiple layers of earthbending, sandbending, and starting to dodge and weave multiple of the attacks, trying to block majority of the man's attacks and also moves. The man is attacking furiously with a bunch of barrages of flames, attacking with rage, anger, and a little bit of precision. Azuki dodging multiple of the attacks with a firmness and more of a freewheeling attack. Azuki using better bending techniques that his mother taught him, or his grandmother taught him, as Azuki starts to dodge more and more of these attacks and these barrages of assaults. Azuki starts to dodge more and more, but he's never fought someone like this. He's never fought someone that moved like this, that used fire like this. The man laughs at him, telling him that he's a good bender, but he's not a great one. Azuki is thrown off guard as he starts to try to focus more and more on where the man is at, as the man disappears throughout the forest and using the shadows to his advantage. Azuki starts to use seismic sense as he instantly pinpoints where the man is, shooting him with a barrage of rock attacks and making multiple rock bullets, hardening them and sharpening them, shooting it right towards the man. The man dodges and dodges and dodges as he gets shot right in the left of shoulder, causing a hole to be formed. He yells in pain as he starts to charge up some sort of attack. Izuku opens his eyes after using seismic sense, as out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning is struck right towards him. Izuku uses majority of all of his earthbending in that split second to pit about 50 to 60 different layers of rock between him and the blast, but it shoots right through it, shooting Izuku directly in the chest, knocking him down to the ground. Izuku fades to black as we get switched the next few days. He wakes up in the hospital, being confused on where he is. He gets up as he feels a sharp pain in his arm as he has a cast on now. They had to put some stilts in his arm temporarily, but they were able to fix his arm just enough so he would be able to bend again. But his arm is irreparably damaged and he has permanent, scarring tissue on that arm now, as it looks somewhat similar to his original scars that he had after the muscular fight in the canon series. Izuku does end up trying to ask what happened last night, as majority of his students or his classmates don't know what happened. Some lightning bolt out of nowhere struck him as he faded to black, and out of nowhere, once the villains showed up, you were just gone. A few hours later, some of the paramedics found you in the forest with a lightning bolt strike on your chest. Izuku looks down as he sees a scar similar to, Avatar Aang's scar that he had on the back of his body in the front of Izuku's chest. Izuku is shocked and straight up confused as hell on why he's not dead. Maybe the crazy amount of layers he put between the shock blast and the actual hit helped, or maybe the man was holding back because the man said he didn't want to kill him. But Izuku was confused more than ever. Who was that man? Was he a firebender? Izuku was thrown off guard and thrown out of it once he hears a familiar voice, as his grandmother came to visit him in the hospital. Multiple of his classmates do start to fan out, including a few, Denki, especially as Denki actually was a big fan of Izuku's mother, or Izuku's grandmother growing up. Izuku's grandmother does give him a little bit of autographs, but she does end up confronting and telling Izuku and asking what happened. Izuku says that he didn't know what exactly happened. All he remembers is fighting a man in black last night and getting shocked by some sort of bolt of light. It's kind of hazy right now, but I think he was a firebender. What is it, grandmother? What is it? I don't know. Maybe you should lay low for the time being. Maybe not do too much bending in public, okay? What's going on? What's happening? I don't know yet, but I'll keep you updated, okay? Okay, Izuku? Stay safe. Watch your back. And whatever you do, never reveal who you are. Never reveal who your family is. Okay? I never told you this before, but there's something brewing in Japan. There's a war coming. And I need you to be prepared. They might already know that you're a part of my family, but never give that information out, okay? As Izuku gets up, as Izuku asks his grandmother what's happening, as Izuku instantly falls onto the ground. His body started being adjusted to the whole him being struck by freaking lightning, but Izuku is quickly helped up by his grandmother, as his grandmother tells him that everything's going to be fine and that he should just rest, okay? She instantly leaves, being thrown off guard and actually looking kind of scared. Izuku does end up getting a conversation going with Ida, Todoroki, and a few others, as they do end up trying to help Bakugo and trying to save him and recruit him. With that being said, Izuku does end up helping the group trying to, pretty much save Bakugo, as majority of the series does end up happening the same. All Might still has the final fight against him and All For One. All Might using the last of his embers to win. We also get switched to Todoroki, Ida, Momo, and Deku actually still confronting and straight up saving Bakugo just like in original canon. Izuku does end up helping a little bit, but only slightly, as he uses Earthbending to help them get more propulsion and more of a boost. Also, Kirishima's there as well. But yes, They do end up still saving and getting Bakugo out of the way pretty quickly, but Izuku using most of his bending at a distance to help them, but not actually being in there, considering that his body's still kind of recovering from him being struck by lightning only a few days ago. Izuku does end up trying to figure out what's happening after the whole entire debacle of the All Might retiring event happens. Izuku does try to figure out what's happening as he tries to reach out to his grandmother. Izuku goes to his grandmother's house as he confronts her, asking her what's happening exactly, as it's something to do with the war. What's happening? What's going on? As she tells him that his father's alive. Now I'm gonna leave it off here, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And as always, guys, have a blessed day. Deuces.